The Thinking Tackle Podcast.
You on my leg and you cast that where I tell you, that carp doesn't know whether you're Julian Cundiff or Mark Spitz.
No,
you know,
it
whatever.
doesn't. No,
It's a huge leveler.
It is. I used to watch, I said to you I used to kart race with Julian Cundiff.
Yeah.
Julian Cundiff.
Did you?
Julian Cundiff, welcome to the podcast. We're live. Thanks, Tobe. No, I used to see Lewis Hamilton racing a lot when I was a kid.
Absolutely, yeah.
And he was a lot younger than me. And that was a talent.
Yeah.
Now
that's a natural talent that has also worked at his natural talent. Lewis understates his effort. I think Lewis understates the effort he puts in. I don't think Lewis Hamilton rolls out of bed, puts on some Versace and goes racing. I think there's a lot more to Lewis Hamilton than he would reveal.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
When he first started racing, his dad, who was running all these different jobs at the same time, they were turning up to kart meetings. His dad was obviously a very good mechanic. And they were beating everybody with nothing equipment-wise. Yeah. They really were doing that. And by the time he was a teenager...
Hello, Mr. Dennis. I'd like to race for Mercedes on
that's
McLaren.
Right. That's the stuff. But he really was that good, and he really did stand out.
But he is good.
It does. It's the trouble. I get disappointed with his public persona.
I do,
because there is so much more to him than
that he won't let go. But that's his psyche, isn't it? That's his tight knit community. Michael Schumacher was the same.
Tiger Woods as well. They just don't want to let anything out, do they?
No, they don't let anything out.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what works for them. You know, and it's great to sometimes less is more.
Do you think it works for them?
I think Lewis Hamilton's champion, Tiger Woods.
Do you think people would like to see a little bit more?
I think
would that benefit Lewis Hamilton?
I don't think he cares.
I don't think so either.
I think Lewis Hamilton is a winner in life. I think Lewis is a bit like Danny. Danny is, as he said, he's a risk taker. Lewis will do what it takes to succeed, and that is far more important than the public persona. Here, Lewis Hamilton is a winner, and I think sometimes what people think of him affects him, but he sees the bigger picture of, I have to win.
And he knows how to do it, and he drains his teammates.
His teammates.
Every single teammate he's had has been drained.
He drains them. Yeah, he does.
Apart from Button, actually.
Yeah, Jensen. But yeah,
I think Jensen could just let it just ride over all that.
But Jensen didn't have the drive that Lewis Hamilton. Rosberg won, and then had to pack it in.
I know. He knew what it took.
He knew what it took in it. I don't have it next year. So Lewis Hamilton lost. But he beat Rosberg because Rosberg couldn't do the next year. However Rosberg wants to dress it up, he could not do the next year against Hamilton because he knew Hamilton would have him.
Yeah, I think Bottas is probably thinking the same now.
Well, it's like we talked about boxing, Golotta, who put Riddick Bowe down twice, and he was expected to absolutely put Lennox Lewis down. Lennox Lewis went in the ring, he looked at Golotta, and you could see Golotta going, that's not what I expected. And Lennox hit him 2 or 3 times. You could see Golotta had lost it. Golotta was, after that fight, Golotta was never the same again. Tyson was never the same again when Holyfield beat him. Ever the same again.
Yeah, we said the other day about this, Tyson's biggest regret probably, if you honestly asked him about his career, it'd be the fact that he never came back.
He never came
being
back.
down in a fight, did he?
Whereas Lewis did.
Or what? Yeah.
And he, not only did he come back,
all the greats.
He absolutely pulverised Oliver McCall in the ring. Oliver McCall just broke down in the ring, and he the job he did
Rackman.
The job he did on Rackman was. Yeah. I don't think Rackman. So he actually bit like Lewis did with Rosberg. Lewis lost, but Rosberg never raced again.
I know. That's exactly what I would do as well. I think with Tyson I love Mike Tyson, and we were talking about Tyson with Darryl. It must.
Is that why we got the ear defenders on?
Maybe.
Don't bite me, Mike.
Yeah, maybe
leave
that's what
leave the ears.
Holyfield should have been wearing.
Yeah.
But it must... he says he doesn't think about boxing anymore.
Well, maybe that's his protection.
Maybe.
That's his protection.
Maybe.
You can walk away from it and you don't look back and think, oh, what if? And I think sometimes, it's like the girlfriend, isn't it? If you get dumped by a girl, the last thing you want to do is keep seeing the same girl.
It's true.
If you shut her away, then you move on with your life. Yes, it's still niggling in there, and one day you will have to deal with that. But I think that's how Tyson deals with boxing, is he's put it in a box away, and that's how he exists.
Departmentalise it.
Departmentalise it, yeah.
Julian, this is the part where we ask you for the gift.
Oh, the gift, right.
This table's getting full. Actually, if listeners that are watching this, they might notice that the table has actually changed now. We've got a new table. Do you think of it, Tobe? Looks a bit better, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's about time it got here.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't built in the end, was it? We had to buy it from an antique shop.
It hasn't been cleaned, by the way. There's a lot of Imagine years to come, this table will be sort of lacquered, and somebody say, this is the table that such and such touch, such and such touch.
I have to say, a few people online have said they want to. They think all the guests should sign it.
Yeah, that was a good idea.
We can't do that with this table.
Can you imagine?
But we could do it. We could do it with the other table, and I've seen some of those comments actually.
Yeah.
So, and that might be a possibility. Maybe we might get you to sign the other table.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we can find it actually.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
memorabilia, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. We might. Yeah, it's a thought anyway. Julian, what have we
right.
got?
Well, there was lots of things I had that I could have donated. But obviously, there's things that are really important. Now, this actually isn't really something that actually belonged to me. One of my heroes I had 3 heroes. It was, Rod Hutchinson, Andy Little, and Kevin Maddox. And Rod is the complete opposite of me in many ways. And I think we have met many times, and he would agree with that. We were polar opposites, but I had such a respect for the man and his contribution to carp fishing. And I was... I did the foreword to his last book, and we met a few times, and he just had that magnetic personality that very few people have. It's what I call the Schumacher, the Bon Jovi, the alien. He was not only a star, but he was iconic with it. A legend is an overused thing, but iconic. He was iconic. And when he passed away, it was a really, really sad day. And I was proud to be invited to his funeral. And it was a sad day, but it was he'd passed away, but it was to think his contribution to carp fishing. And when we had the celebration day at the Carp Society, various things of Rod's were sold, and I got a gift from his family, and because they knew I knew Rod, and I'd written pieces with him for Crafty Carper, and we conversed a few times, and I was a fan of his, and they gave me a pair of his sunglasses, which were Rod's own sunglasses, and I've got what I call my memorabilia cupboard upstairs, which is full of various stuff. I've got stuff from Kevin Maddox, Andy Little, Rod. And I just thought, I know how important Rod is to the ethos of Korda in many ways, and I know that Damo's a massive Hutchinson fan. And I thought, these sunglasses of Rod's, they can sit in my little cupboard at home, and they're either going to be donated to the Carp Society for the museum, or they were going to be donated here. And I thought, well, we've got Rod's sunglasses that he personally owned, and obviously his order of service from his funeral. I thought, that is somebody who's not only inspired my generation, but probably generations to come, and so I thought that would be, that's my memento, and that's what I will leave behind.
No, that's great. It's no coincidence, Julian, either that, you're not the first gift to hand over Rod Hutchinson type memorabilia.
Yeah.
It keeps coming up. What was that personality like then? What was it about that?
Well, God, I mean, Rod goes back to when I first started carp fishing, and really, it's like the black and the white. I was a Kevin Maddox fan. I was, in my day, in the early to mid 80s, you were a Maddox man or you're a Hutchinson man. And I could walk into somebody's swim and go, he's a Maddox man or he's a Hutchinson man. And I was that neat.
Can you explain the differences?
We know. Well, Rod Hutchinson was a smell the hops, wasn't he? And along the way. And he was, more relaxed about his carp fishing, winding in, going for a drink, experimenting with lots and different things, particles here and there. It was a bit here and there. He's a bit fluid with his fishing. Whereas Maddox, he was almost, carp fishing was arithmetic. It was 2 and 2 equals 4, and he was very methodical, which is, I am a methodical person. I am the most methodical, organised person. And Maddox's way of carp fishing appealed to me. And although I was brought up in the Maddox way, Rod Hutchinson had more of a star quality. Maddox was somebody who we could all copy and almost become like, but Rod floated round on a different league for me.
Was he a bit of a mystery then to a lot of people?
He was a mystery, yeah. I think he was a mystery, and I think that he had far more influence than Kevin in many ways. Although Kevin was the guy, my guy, I think Rod was the Rolling Stones, the U2. I might not have been a massive fan of that music, but Rod, to me, operated in a different era, a different level.
Yeah, and so Kevin's book kind of inspired you to write your first book.
Kevin Maddox was the first book that I thought wow, I could do that. It was, you read Rod's book and it was just far away places, magical places. It was like climbing the Himalayas or Everest. Whereas with Kevin Maddox's, everything was step by step. It in effect was thinking tackle for 1985. And I read Kevin Maddox's book, and all of a sudden the mystery was gone. Carp fishing mystery was lifted because everything was photographed and everything was made to look simple. And to me, that was a massive, massive advantage. And Kevin made carp fishing understandable to me.
Yeah, and I found that as well, actually. Yeah, Hutchie's, it was more colourful and it was all a little bit encrypted, whereas, Kevin was a little bit more. But I love the Carp Fever films that he made as well. Everything was, but I think it showed us that we didn't need to be quite as disciplined as that to be able to enjoy going fishing and to catch fish, as Rod Hutchison and maybe Rob Mayling did as well. So
the perfect carp angler, wouldn't it? The perfect carp angler would have Rod Hutchinson's understanding of carp. It would have Kevin Maddox's technical proficiency, and it would have Andy Little's drive. That would be the perfect carp angler, and that's been said many times. If you could put the three of those together.
Well, how cool was that the three of them were all fishing together at one point?
Absolutely, on Savvy. Yeah,
Kevin
awesome. Didn't do a lot on Savvy, but those three did fish together. I know that Kevin and Andy fished on Darenth together. I don't think that wasn't one of Rod's waters, but those three, they were my big three, and still are.
Yeah. So a few changes in your life now. You've retired from work. Was it just over a year ago?
I retired in March 2018, and it's I started when I was a young man, when I was 17. And I always say to people about this, life goes so quickly. When people say, well, you're too young to retire, you're a lucky devil. I think, no, I did 38 years in the same job. And I remember going for that first interview. I remember getting the job. And I remember, you go into court and you'd be sat there and somebody say, right, everybody into court one, Mr. X is retiring. And you go and sit in court and you think, I haven't got a clue who Mr. X is. I've never seen him in my life before, but I'd clap, etc., and he'd get his little trophy or whatever. And then as the years went on, you'd start to recognise people who were given retirement speeches. Then actually you would remember that I've actually sat in court. He was one of the wingers in court as a legal advisor. And then you would get to the stage where all of a sudden the boss would ring you up and say, Mr. Y is retiring, Julian. I want you to say a few words on his behalf. And then all of a sudden you get that knock on the door that says, Julian, just go through the curtains. This is your retirement due.
Does that all come flashing back at you when you're still
absolutely. And I'm not an emotional man, but when I walked through those curtains and there were 200 people, and this was one of 4 dues I had, stood there, and some of them were from 1980 when I first started work. And I was choked up. And in fact, I still feel choked up now. I'm still Julian Cundiff, age 16. And I'm looking at all these people and they're all going, wow, this is your life. And that, life goes so quickly.
A lot of endearment there. So how is that? Because your whole fishing routine used to be kind of moulded around this going to work and going fishing. So what's it like now then to not
fantastic.
Have that?
Absolutely fantastic. It's a different world. All my fishing was overnighters. I never fished weekends after probably the late 80s, early 90s, because if you had a girlfriend and you went fishing at weekends, you didn't have a girlfriend. You couldn't have a girlfriend to go fishing at weekends. And I realised if I wanted to keep my girlfriend, weekends, and then as you get older, you realise actually life isn't just fishing. So all my fishing was overnighters. It was getting there at 6 p.m. and it was winding at 6 a.m. So not only did you get the worst choice of swim, you were winding in as most of the big fish were being caught. Because even now, most of my bites come between 7 and 11 in the morning. So to not actually have to fish nights, I'll fish nights now, and I'm starting to do nights now because the fish are coming out at night. And it's not just about putting the hours in, it's about putting the sensible hours in. Any fool can fish 7 days a week, but a good angler picks the right time to target those fish. And if I have to wind in at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was doing 3-4 nights a week sometimes, I thought that was clever. I've done four nights and I've not had a fish. It would have been a lot more sensible to go Friday night and actually fish through till 12 o'clock Saturday morning than to do 4 nights in the week, puff my chest out and say, hey, yeah, I've had 4 blanks. It's picking your time, being sensible with your time. So this is so much easier. It is not hard to catch carp when you're retired.
But actually filling the work gap in, how have you managed to do it? Is it just What are you doing?
Not
Nothing?
at all. It's funny, when I retired from work, the year, I knew I was going to retire a year previously, and I wrote a list of all the jobs I had to do, and it was a piece of A3 paper, and, I am old school. I wrote it down, didn't put it in an iPad and a cloud. I wrote it down, and there were 70 or 80 jobs, and I looked at that and I thought, what am I going to do when I've done all those jobs? The things that you put off for years, meeting people, doing things, talking to people, painting things. I got halfway down the list, and all of a sudden another 10 crept on, and you do another 4, but 6 creep on, and all of a sudden the list up to... I love it. There is nothing about retirement that I don't love. It's heaven.
One day.
You're far too young.
Yeah, I don't know whether Korda are doing retirement policies at the moment. Pension schemes, are they, Tove? We got a...
No, I think we might be a while off that.
Yeah.
So I became aware of you, and you were one of the first anglers that I probably become aware of. You were writing in Practical...
Course Fisherman.
Course Fishing magazine.
Yeah.
How many times do I get that wrong?
Course Fisherman.
Course Fisherman.
Yeah.
And you were also kind of promoting... Well, you did a good job, I think, of promoting fishing up north as well.
Yeah.
How much of an influence do you think that had on carp fishing up north around that period?
To be honest, it wasn't easy, because in those days it was a question of, who are you? Who's this young lad, 23? What does he know? Why should he be writing about carp fishing? Because in those days, you had to be a big name to write a carp book. You had to be a big name to write in a magazine. And local boy made good, or local boy trying to make good, never went down with the locals well. And it was really difficult, because I think my first article that ever appeared in a carp fishing magazine would be 1986 in Carp Fisher, which Tim Paisley got me in. Now, in 1986, my personal best was probably £19.12. And all of a sudden, I'm appearing in Carp Fisher. There's people writing about 40-pounders. And none of the locals liked lads who were trying to make good. And it was very difficult. So I think my influence in the north between about 86 and 92, 93 was, I did bring carp fishing up, but to be honest, I was still that upstart. You can achieve a lot nowadays very quickly, but in those days things did not happen very quickly, and you were expected to serve your apprenticeship.
Yeah. So what made you think, right, well, I'm not necessarily as experienced as some of these other guys that are writing? What made you think, well, yeah, but I can still do this. I can still write and be relevant to people? Because
I was hopeless at school. At school, I was one of those people who, I went to Selby Grammar School. I passed my, whatever it was, 11 plus, and got into Selby Grammar School. And the grammar schools in those days, they looked after people who were high achievers. If you were a high achiever, you went to the cricket club, you played rugby, etc., and your parents supported you and sent you to the Alps, etc., they pushed those people. Like it or not, that was the truth. And I was one of the middle range, and I never tried hard enough. And the only thing I was good at was English. That was the only thing I was any good at. So writing was quite easy for me. I mean, I was so hopeless that French, you had to do French, you had no choice. And I remember I just didn't understand it at all, because to me, French, I had to translate it directly. I couldn't do it. And after, I think, probably a month, the French teacher, Madame Drain, just came up to me, and she sort of stood over me and she said, Julian, just sit at the back, be quiet and read Angling Times. Now, in that day, that couldn't happen in this day and age, but literally, I didn't do any French whatsoever. Every Wednesday, I read Angling Times in the French lesson whilst keeping quiet. But of course, you still have to do the exam.
You didn't have to translate it back into French.
No, I just went into the, where you do the little room, you do the little talk, and there's 2 people or 3 people speak to in French. And I looked at them for about a minute, and they're just like, poo-poo, go away. And, the only thing I was any good at was English. And my mum, a vicar, a priest, she wrote 13 books, and it's just obviously a trait. I found writing I enjoy writing, and it was so easy to write about carp fishing. And I thought, I want to actually write about carp fishing up here, because very few people wrote about the waters I fished. So I found it easy to write about carp fishing, and I enjoyed it. And yes, there were a lot of naysayers, and
Did anyone ever question your lack of experience when you were doing
all
that?
the time, all the time. I would get knocked all the time. Who do you think you are? I've had needles stuck in my tyres in the 80s, and what have you ever caught, and how come you're doing this? And you just think, if you actually know what you're doing is right for you, it doesn't matter what anybody says to you. So people can insult you, but if it's not the truth, insults have no validity. So it makes no difference. So I knew I wanted to write. I loved fishing and I love writing, and I was prepared to keep doing that. And obviously Tim Paisley gave me my start.
Did you want to create a kind of a persona around carp fishing? Did you realise? I wanted
to
not just be a writer, but be a whole kind of.
I wanted to be. Kevin Maddox was my hero.
Right.
Again, I wanted to be Kevin Maddox. And if you ever look at any of the old pictures of me, I've got the Kevin Maddox jumper on, I've got the fish across my knees. And unfortunately, instead of a brace...
It's all come back in now,
I know,
hasn't it?
yeah. Instead of it being a brace of 30s, it was a brace of mid-doubles. But I desperately wanted to be Kevin Maddox, but I couldn't grow the moustache. So the moustache never came. I just looked like Blakey on the buses. I get this little Adolf Hitler tash. And I realised one day, I don't want to be the second Kevin Maddox. I want to be the first Julian Cundiff. And, I sort of cringe a bit and look back at it and think, I actually created my own persona. So I had the big hair, I had the suntan. I created my own persona. And whether people like it or not, it's the same with Danny, the glasses. He created, that's who he was, and it simply is an extension of his personality.
Yeah. Well, I think you've done a good job there, actually.
Yeah.
So the term... celebrity angler. I mean, do you not think we take that a little bit too seriously?
I think some people take it too seriously. Celebrity angler. I think there are anglers who have influence. You're not celebrities. You're not going to the O2 and doing 17,000 tickets and selling £20 T-shirts. There are people that anglers look up to, but we are big fish in a small pond. I'm not going to go out of here, fill up at Costa and somebody say they want an autograph. Very, very doubtful. They may do, but that'll be the one fisherman. But in relation to celebrity anglers, I think you need to put it into perspective. You are a big fish in a small pond, and you should be thankful that somebody wants to give you a bit of their time. So when somebody comes up to me, and I know that what I've done has influenced them, I take great pride in that. I would hate that person to walk away from me and think, that wasn't who I expected to meet at all. And I defy anybody to say that they met me and they got something that they didn't expect. I used to get a lot of stick, but I can honestly say that anybody who's ever met me, I don't think anybody could ever say, well, he wasn't what I expected, and he was a lesser person, or he wasn't very nice and he had no time for me. And that to me is more important than money or anything, is my reputation. So although carp fishing to me is fun, it's never been a job, but I treat it exactly the same way I would do as a job. Nobody will come to me and not think I'm their greatest friend. Yeah. They will come to me and they will talk to me about having met me 8 years ago. When they walk away from me 2 minutes later, they won't know that I don't remember them. All they will think is I'm their best friend, and that's what I want.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with people. Crikey, you need heroes and inspirations, don't you? And they don't necessarily need to be famous either. It's I said to you, my biggest inspiration is my school teacher, Mrs. Waterfield. She's probably long gone now, but she instilled a bit of confidence into me, and she saw what was good, what I was good at, and what I wasn't so good at, and and I'm always thankful for that. So it doesn't necessarily need to be somebody well known. But what about the people themselves that are the so-called celebrities? Can that go to their heads a little bit too much?
It does. It goes to heads all the time.
Yeah.
And I just think you're just another bald bloke walking around a carp conference, or you're just another hairy bloke walking around a conference. Most people who take themselves too seriously come to grief. To be famous in carp fishing, you have to be recognisable in most places. And even now, I'm a probably well-known carp angler, and people now, you talk to them, they think, I know him from somewhere, but I don't know who he is. There are very few people who transcend it and will be recognised every carp conference. Most carp anglers who take themselves very seriously, who haven't been on telly, because telly is a great leveller. If you are on television, then you become more of a celebrity. But if you've not been on television, most carp anglers who think and take themselves seriously can walk around most carp conferences and people have not got a clue who they are. It's a longevity thing, time. But then, of course, different people come through. So you can be famous for your era, but all of a sudden a new breed of anglers come and go, Terry Earn, yes, he does those videos, but they wouldn't know any more about him. Not that Terry would ever care.
No, he wouldn't, would he?
No, not at all.
What about carp fishing in general? Do you think we've made that into something bigger than it actually is?
Well, I think carp, it's whatever it matters to you. Motor racing is highly important to me. Formula One is highly important to me. But I think it's lost its grip on the world.
Do you know what? When you go to a motor racing event, or you're watching the cars go around the track, and it just feels like you could be at any, whether it's Formula One or a club, it's exactly the same, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're actually there, you don't get that sense of importance, and maybe a little bit more than you would at a club race, but it's not that much different.
Carp fishing is important to the people who are involved. To somebody who's catching a carp, Korda, Nash, Fox, it is important. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not a cure for cancer. It's just there. It's whatever you want it to be. So carp fishing is whatever you want it to be. And it can be about catching the biggest fish, the smallest fish. The thing about carp fishing is it puts smiles on faces.
It does.
And if it doesn't, you will never see me with a fish looking unhappy, whether it's a 12-pounder or a 38-pounder. Carp fishing makes me happy, and the day that I stop being happy, I won't do it anymore. It's not a job.
It's interesting because Ali was saying with Monster Carp at the moment, they're trying to tap into obviously a bigger audience. They're trying to get into the like the Bear Grylls kind of shows where I think carp angling and fishing can be just as interesting potentially as a guy going out and doing this adventurous stuff. But Bear Grylls has made it, made it more interesting by getting the right interest.
My good lady, Roz, she didn't get carp fishing at all, and it wasn't really her kind of thing. And she'd see the magazines and make the right noises. And I said to her, one day I'm just going to take you carp fishing. And it was probably the worst time ever to take her. For her it was great. So we got up, 8 o'clock in the morning, drove down to this nice syndicate in the middle of nowhere, got set up about 10, sunny day, etc., etc. And I explained what I did and why I used buzzers and bobbins and why I used certain baits. And we hadn't had anything. We walked round, we found some fish moving, and we baited up, and we caught 3 fish that day. And she said, it's not something I want to do, but I now get why you do it.
Right.
And I think all the urban banks, the thinking tackle, the monster carp, anything that actually shows the public we're not just sat on a canal with a woodbine between 9 and 4 o'clock and going home. I don't think the general public have any idea about fishing and what it means to me. And the fact that somebody in the general public thinks it's stupid does not have any effect on me. Look at train spotters. We might think train spotters are stupid, but they enjoy it. And if you enjoy it, what the general public think about it does not bother me at one iota.
Have you ever thought about ways of being able to promote? I mean, Barry Hearn and Eddie Hearn. I noticed you've done some stuff with them recently. Could we get, what is it, Matchroom, isn't it?
Yeah, Matchroom. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, could we get them more involved? I mean, would it be good for them to be able to promote the sport more? They're in a position of being able.
They are in a position, and it's part. And I think they enjoy fishing. But you've got to put yourself in perspective. We are not celebrities. George Groves, a boxer, Steve Davis, they are big-time celebrities. And I think anglers, we just need to realise our place in that grand scheme of things. So when I go to these do's, I'm the celebrity coach. I'm not Steve Davis. I'm not George Groves. I'm not Josh Chan. I'm not a national figure. And I think the Hearns recognise the level of superstardom, and they do promote fishing, and anything that makes people have happiness in life, I'm all for.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, hopefully it continues to grow.
I think fishing will grow as a sport, and I think carp fishing, I've heard that carp fishing 20 years ago, it'll not get any bigger. It gets bigger in different ways. Carp are far more easy to catch now, and great.
And I think we've attracted more of these hobby carp anglers as well. So we're not necessarily, and it doesn't matter, we can all be different, can't we, with our fishing? But so we got the serious people, but we've also got the guys that like to dip in and out of different hobbies, and as long as we're attracting people, and those people potentially might stay, and that's how you create a bigger.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a hobby cyclist. I love riding my pedal cycle, but I ride a hybrid because it's comfortable for me, because I always ride trail bikes, so it's comfortable for me. I average 17, 18 miles an hour. I don't set out in the rain. I don't wear expensive gear. I don't clip in. I don't join a riding club. So I dip in and dip out. But to me, I get just as much enjoyment as I would if I spent $7,000 on a bike and was doing 22 miles an hour. So a hobby carp fisherman is no less important to me. I will not treat a hobby cyclist or a hobby carp angler any different. There's nothing that says one's more important than the other. We're all important. A kid who catches his first double is no less important than anybody else. I look at the longevity of the person and the influence they've had, but they're just as important.
Julian Cundiff, as we see him today, have you always been this confident, outgoing sort of guy? Were you like that when you were younger?
Yes and no. You develop your own personality. My mum installed into me that whatever you want to be, you can be. And as a kid, I was probably the least likely person ever to get a girlfriend in their life. Your mum is a vicar. You live in the countryside. You don't like spending money. You've not got any transport. You don't drink. You don't smoke. You've got a pet rabbit. You like rock music. You don't dance. And you go fishing. Now, if you're a girl aged 13 to 17, that is probably the most unattractive.
And so everyone at school knew that, did they?
I was absolutely the biggest loser at school ever. He was like, he's the weird kid that likes Kiss. He's the weird kid that likes fishing. He's the weird kid who goes to church with his mother. And my mum installed me. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. I'm not bothered what anybody else thinks about my hair, about the music I like. All that matters to me is what I like. And it's really funny that all the things that I like, I've never let go. So people used to laugh at fishing. And the same people that laugh at fishing go, God, you still go. And the same people that used to laugh at rock music go, any chance of you getting me tickets for Kiss? And all the things I've ever loved, I've loved for me, not because what anybody else thinks about them. And I always try and instill into anybody I meet, if you're happy doing what you're doing, it doesn't matter that somebody else has caught a 40-pounder. Did that 12-pounder make you happy? And if it did, then that's all good. So I simply am a larger extension of Julian Cundiff. So I've always been similar, but I've always been different. I've never felt the same as anybody else. I've always felt when I walk in a room, I'm different to anybody else. Not better, but different.
Right, yeah. What about friends and stuff? Did you have a lot of friends?
No. I had a very small circle of friends at school. I've got 2 or 3 friends that I've still got friends at school. I've got lots of acquaintances, but, you know, when you've got interests of fishing, rock music, living in the country, no transport, and things like that, you don't have a wide circle of friends. I have not changed me to fit in with everybody else. So I won't do anything to alienate people, but I won't do things to draw a bigger audience. So in carp fishing terms, I know if I went down south and went targeting the big fish, I've had editors said this to me. Now, Jules, if you could do this, do that, whatever, it would get you a monthly column. No, that's not what I do. And I've tried to be true to myself. And if people think that's I'm an idiot for doing it, I don't care, because at the end of the day, I've got to be true to myself. What anybody else thinks about me doesn't matter. I've got to look at myself in the mirror.
Do you know, I can remember a guy at school exactly the same as you, you know, and he was into Bryan Adams.
Yeah.
And he wore this great big long black coat, and he didn't look the most fashionable kid, and he was completely, you know, he was his own self, but he didn't follow the trends of everybody else. And years later, you know, you think actually that his taste in music and in all that stuff, it was just ahead of everybody else's.
Yeah.
Do you feel, you've said before as well that there have been certain things that you've said in the past which have actually come back and it's proven you to have been, you know, more foresightful.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I started writing about how to catch carp, and I started detailing everything you did. It wants to be not just a hook, it was a size 8 hook. It wasn't just a size 8 hook, it was a size 8 Sprite hook. And I was one of the first people in my era to actually lay everything down, well before YouTube, well before Thinking Tackle. The practical carp fishing videos were well before any other videos that were done by people. And yes, I do get some sense of joy, and I do smile to myself when I see people doing things that I did and said 20, 30 years ago. I remember writing a series for Carp World called Mind Games, and I wrote about keeping yourself fit, looking after yourself, that your mind is far more important than the latest rods and things like that. And I got absolutely slated by some of the biggest names in the business saying, who on earth that you are, you know, it's all right for you because you've got a gym, it's all right for you. And nowadays I read people writing about vitamin tablets, about keeping hydrated, about getting your mind in focus. And I don't go, hey, I came up with that first. I go, Yeah, I sort of talked about that 20, 30 years ago. But there again, it's like all these rigs. Who invented what? My multi-rig was really a version of Mike Cameron's multi-rig, which could be I don't like to use the word, but I don't have small penis syndrome. I don't need to put hand up and say, please, sir, I invented that, or I came up with that first. What I'm doing is simply things that Rod Hutchinson, Kevin Maddox, Tim Paisley gave me, or my mother gave me, and I've simply developed them. And if somebody else uses them and comes up with them for himself and does a better version, I'm simply applauding them.
Well, that's what we do. We're called Korda Developments.
Yeah.
We develop ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not scared to admit that either.
Yeah, I'm not Julian Cundiff, innovator. I'm just trying to be better every time.
Yeah. What about your because your upbringing? It was stable, and then you've mentioned your mum was a deacon.
Yeah, priest. A deaconess. My mum was one of the first people to be ordained in the Church of England. I think she was the second person ever to become a female vicar. So. My mum, who passed away probably 8-9 years ago, was a massive influence. I've sister, my father's still alive, and I am simply a product of my parents, and I'm a product of Tim Pitt. He's obviously not my father. sorry, Dad. But everything I am is an influence. I haven't just woke up one day and invented carp fishing or invented Julian. Everything that I am is part of something that somebody else has given me. Are
you religious?
I believe in a greater being. I don't believe in an old man with a beard and things like that. But my mum said to me, and she said, if it doesn't exist and you've led a better life, and when you go through that door there is nothing there, what's wrong with that? You have just simply... So I try and be the best person I can, and if I get up there and there's nothing there and I don't go downstairs or upstairs, if I've led a better life, that's all I can hope to do. That's I just try and be the best person I can. And sometimes I get it completely wrong, and sometimes I get it right.
Do you think that's quite unusual advice from a deaconess?
Yeah, because she couldn't switch on a television program and say, "There's God, there's the Lord." It's a belief, isn't it? It's a belief, and if you have that belief. She had that strong belief. And when I questioned her about it, that was her belief. And she said, even if I'm wrong, Julian, if I've led a more fruitful life by that belief, then I'm happy with that if it doesn't exist. But I know it exists.
So it wasn't a particularly religious household then?
My mum was. It wasn't. My mum never forced religion down my throat. Now, and I would go to church, and I enjoyed church, and I enjoyed what they did for me. And my mum's pastoral role was far more important than her standing in a pulpit. What she did for people was far more important than preaching a sermon, as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you got a sister as well?
Yeah, I've got a sister, and she works for the Archbishop of York, and we are totally different.
Right.
And, as a kid, one of the funniest stories ever was mums and sons, there is a bond that no sister could have with her mother. And I remember when my mum was ordained in the church, it was at York Minster, and I was working at court then. And I remember my sister had travelled up from London that day. She'd taken a day off work. She'd come on the train. She got up early, etc. And my mum said, I'm being ordained as a vicar, shall we say? And I said, I'll come along to that, Mum. Looking back, I should have given. So I went along at dinner time, and I watched the service, and we all had a pictures taken. The press were there. And I remember my mum put her arm round me and she announced to the press that this is my son. He's given his lunch hour up to watch me being ordained today. And I could see my sister thinking, I gave the day up. So yeah, I'm so lucky I had a great family, and I still got a great family.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I was going to say, so you've been around sort of decades now, Julian. Yep. So what is the secret to being able to continue doing what you've been doing for so long?
To enjoy it.
Yeah.
You cannot keep kidding yourself, because one day you will wake up and go, I don't like this anymore. I don't know why I'm doing this anymore. And if you are true to yourself, so, I like cycling, I like motorbikes, I like Formula One, I like WWE, I like bodybuilding, I like carp fishing, I like rock music. So because I like those things, there's never a time when I wake up and go, do you know what? I've never really liked that, and I did that to fit in. So my secret simply is I only do what I like. So I don't go down south chasing big carp 4 days in a row. I've done what I enjoy, and so that makes it's not hard for me. Sometimes I want to cry when it's raining and I've blanked and it's hard work. but it's never anything other than a joy.
It's those other hobbies you've had. Or hobbies or interests.
Yeah.
I think they're a bit more than that, aren't they? Could you have taken those to the same level you've taken carp fishing to?
No, definitely. I was a decent cyclist. I was a decent motorbike rider. I never had the passion. I never had the passion to say I'm prepared to do everything in a motorbike race, break my arm, whatever. I just realised that carp fishing was something I was decent at, and carp was something that you didn't need to be hugely rich. It's a great level, is carp fishing. And I realised pretty early on that I didn't have any natural gifts that other people didn't have. So I have the wrong genetics to be a bodybuilder. I didn't have rich enough parents or driven enough parents to be a Formula One star or a motorbike star. And I realised that the only things I was particularly good at were things that I was in control of. And I was in control of carp fishing. So I was in control of saying, I'm going out with a girl or I'm going carp fishing. I was in control of saying, I'm going to spend £10 on beer or £10 on hooks. And I realised that carp fishing is a great leveller. And I always say to these people that carp fishing is the greatest leveller. I could put you in Lewis Hamilton's Formula One team. I could give you his mechanics. I could give you the best tyres. I could give you a year of practice. You're still 20 seconds off the pace. You're still not getting anywhere. And the same goes with Marc Marquez and his motorbike. The same goes with playing for Chelsea or Man U or Liverpool. And yet, carp fishing, I can give you my tackle. I can show you where to cast. You can cast out at, say, Home Fen, and you can catch a 71-pounder. So you can be good. Because that carp doesn't know whether it's Julian Cundiff or Mark Levels or whatever. So carp fishing is the greatest leveller, and anybody can be good at it.
Yeah, it is. Like I say, and that it really does put it into perspective when you say that you can go out and catch. You can catch whatever you want to catch nowadays, can't you? And,
absolutely.
Yeah. What about writing letters then, Julian? Because you were quite prolific in the day. For maybe you still are. Are you still receiving letters to this day?
I still get probably half a dozen letters a week now from various people. Yeah.
So you wouldn't think that would happen so much nowadays?
Still people do. I mean, it goes back to probably my biggest influence in carp fishing generally, which is Tim Paisley. Not my biggest influence on tactics or bait or whatever, but as a person, Tim Paisley's my biggest influence. And I remember sending my first article for Carp Fisher to him, and instead of just keeping it or rejecting it, he wrote me a letter back and said, thank you for it. It'd be nice if we had some photos that are in focus. It'd be nice if we had some photographs other than of yourself. It's lovely to see 10 pictures of you, but how about one of a tree or the water? And he showed an interest in me. And I thought, wow, yeah. So I wrote back to him and he wrote back to me. And it's almost that 20 seconds with Slash or Bon Jovi where they give you eye contact. He stirred something with me. So when anybody ever sends me a letter, anybody tweets me, anybody sends me anything on Facebook, 20 seconds of my time, 10 seconds of my time, 2 minutes of my time, I like to think that I've done my bit and I can maybe encourage them. And I still get people who write and say, I've kept my letters from 1992 you wrote to me. I kept my letters from 1994. And I've always wanted to say, nobody can ever say they wrote to me and didn't get a reply. Ever.
So how much time would you actually spend on replying to letters?
In the olden days,
individually,
a letter would take me somewhere between 2 and 10 minutes to write. And when I would come back from holiday, I would have 40, 50, 60 letters. And I would always take the Monday off work and always answer them. And obviously I got leaflets printed up, Julian Cundiff's successful guide to fishing, there'd be recipes. But often, people have got these letters, there's diagrams of rigs and stuff like that. But it was almost, I can't catch carp, Jules, how can you help me? Whereas nowadays it's, what hook do I need to use? What bait? How do I glug and glaze? Should I use a diffusion leader? Should I use a helicoil dropper? And it's a lot easier now because it's not, please tell me everything about carp fishing, but this is the little bit I need to fix. So yeah, absolutely. I used to answer them on the train. Now it's great because I can answer them on the exercise bike. So I've got a gym at home. So if I'm on the running machine, exercise bike, I'm doing my tweets, I'm doing my Facebook, and everybody gets an answer because that literally 20 seconds of my time can turn his season round or give him confidence.
And the letter writing, does that tend to come from younger or older anglers?
Older anglers. Yeah. Because if you're a younger angler, so sometimes I'll get a letter, I'll get a text or an email or a tweet, and it'll say, it'll be a huge question and I can't answer it immediately. So I'll just write to me and send me an SAE. And you just know the age because they'll go, what's an SAE? And I'll go, stamped addressed envelope, right? And then literally I will get a letter through the post and it will have 2 first-class stamps on the envelope to me. And I'll get the envelope inside and his address is on it and there's no stamp. And I think, no, we're
a bit confused.
Yeah, we're a bit confused. But they will get an answer and they will get a rig diagram and they'll get a signed picture or whatever. And I just think I'm still the 13-year-old Julian Cundiff. But I'm also this guy that goes, wow, you want a picture with me? And I never take that for granted and think I'm important because I can go and stand at the O2 and like maybe 4 people out of 17,000 people want the picture taken. Hey, you're that bloke who goes fishing, aren't you? And they'll have the picture and there's like 16,996 people going, who's he?
I know. Well, you look like a rock star.
Well, it actually works. It is. My friend Duff said, whenever you go to these shows, just look the part, talk straight and say, I've come for my passes, you will get those passes.
Do you not feel a bit embarrassed when people come up to you?
What, at a show? No.
You don't?
Never. In fact, I take it as an honour. And, embarrassed? No. I just...
So some celebrities probably would. Some celebrities don't necessarily want attention, do they?
But there again, I would hope that somebody wouldn't come up to me while I was having a meal.
Right.
And you've got to pick and choose. And my friend Duff Batty says, you will know when it's time to ask for a picture with them. If a well-known rock guitarist is talking to a well-known rock guitarist, you don't walk in and interject. If the rock guitarist is smoking, you don't ask for your picture. And it's, you just need to pick and choose your time. So I will always give people a picture and time. And I always say to people, you can spend as much time as you want talking to me on the bank. There is just one time, just when I'm setting up, just give me that time to set up, think about what I'm doing. Thereafter, I'll tie you a rig, I'll give you bait, I'll tell you what to do, but just don't kick the ass out of it.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it?
I don't mind. It's great. You're spreading some happiness with people's lives.
Yeah, you are. What about actually? So, have you got good feedback from anglers about how they've progressed? The question I'm probably trying to ask you is, do you think all this instruction, personally, you've seen real development from anglers because of your instruction?
I would hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
You get them.
There's so much out there now, Jules.
There's so much out there, and it's that complication. I go back to a slideshow I saw Roger Smith do in the mid-'80s. And up until then, I would look at Kevin Maddox, Rod Hutchinson, Andy Little and think they were mythical beasts, fishing mythical waters, doing things that I could never do. And Roger Smith did this slideshow, and I'm not sure if Kerry and Roger there, it was just Roger, and he talked about fishing savvy, and he made it very simple. He talked about time, finding the fish, casting the rig out, a hair rig, a little bit of semolina, one of Rod Hutchinson's baits. And I came out there thinking, do you know what? I can do that. It's not rocket science. And I've realised that carp fishing isn't rocket science. And I can teach people to get to a certain level. But thereafter, I call it the 70%ers. Everybody nowadays can get to 70% very quickly. In the olden days, it took a long time to get to a certain level. But what you did is you understood every little bit of level that you crept up. You understood it, how it changed. Nowadays, people get to that line on the graph very quickly, and they don't see how all the little bits and pieces come together. So I get lots of people to 70%, but when I say to them, you need to tie 10 rigs at home. Why? I can tie them on the bank. Because when you're on the bank, you want to be looking at fish, not tying up rigs. You want to have a sharpened hook. Well, hooks should be sharp straight out the packet. Yeah, but they can be sharper. And you need to mark your line. You need to draw sight lines, even if you don't think you're going to catch a carp. If you draw a sight line and you get a bite 6 hours later, right, which tree was I casting towards? So the bulk of the general public can get to 70% very quickly. It's the next 30% that's the hardest. And for every 100 people I speak to, there's 1% who actually go, do you know what? I'll invest in that sharpened up. Do you know what? I will take a notebook with me. And that's what separates the very successful from the successful.
Yeah. There must be a lot of 70%ers out there as well, because, we went fishing here a few months ago on a well-known day ticket complex. And I was amazed at the standard of angling. It wasn't necessarily that great. And you could see.
You did take Danny fishing then? Only joking, Danny.
Toby fishing.
Hey, come on.
Actually, Toby gets some stick on this podcast, Julian, a little bit. A guy wrote in. We do read the comments on here.
Oh, we read them all.
Of course we do.
Yeah.
And providing it's not insulting,
yeah.
I think any feedback is good feedback. One of them was because Toby doesn't go fishing, and I think you're slow on flashing pictures up, Toby.
I think people expect me to. Well, it's a lot of people that work here. They expect them to know anything and everything.
Experts.
And I would be one of the few who just doesn't.
He's got more important things to do. But one of the comments, so the guy was going, he's terrible on the cameras or whatever. And then another guy wrote back and said, he's probably tying rigs up, which did make me laugh. And I hope that...
I know, it's when I do the shows, and I do a lot of talks and slideshows, or in fact, I call them slideshows, that shows my age. They're presentations out there. I still call them slideshows, even though I don't show slides. And when I talk to the audience, I say, the best thing about carp fishing is almost certainly the bloke next to you can't be asked. Because I will talk to you about sharpened hooks. I will talk to you about feeling the lead down. I will talk to you about buying certain things and things like that. And almost certainly the bloke next to you can't be asked. And I says, that is the difference between why you catch 3 and he catches 1. There are days when luck comes into it, but in the grand scheme of things, the bloke who says, no, that cast wasn't spot on. The difference between Darryl and your average angler is it has to be right. Nobody's ever been successfully consistently by can't be asked. And what I've noticed that the more I can be asked, the better I get. There is luck sometimes, but the harder you work, the luckier you get. And there are people who are a lot better talent than me at carp fishing, but just cannot be bothered. And I'll say, look, you look at that sharpened hook, and it amazes me. I'll show them sharpened hooks, and I'll grip my hand like that, let go, and 2 or 3 hooks will stick in my hand. They just won't fall off. And the guy will go, that's unbelievable, mate. That is unbelievable. And then he'll come back and he'll have bought a hat or a T-shirt.
I know.
And he won't buy the sharpened hooks because he'll go to me, they should be sharp as they come. And I'll go, no.
But do you think there's a good percentage of people that are just not... They must be watching the shows and watching because there's so much out there, maybe not necessarily reading... But they are looking at information or looking at magazines and stuff. Why aren't they learning?
Well, it's a two-way thing. They get confused and also they can't be bothered. So getting confused, I can completely understand. It's dead easy for me. I have the same starting points on every single water, but those starting points are starting points I've developed over 20 years. So I know what mainline to use. I know what lead to use, but that's over years and years. And I know that cell might come into fashion. I know that sticky krill might come into fashion. I know the cranked hook might come into fashion, but I've got my starting points that will work virtually all the time. And then occasionally actually, that's catching a few more fish. I need to think about changing my starting point. So you get people who are all over the place. They're completely, every Christmas they have new gear. And then you get the people who and I'll watch them and I fish with them and they'll cast out and I'll look at them and they'll look at me and I know that they know that wasn't close enough. And I won't say anything. They'll put the rod in the rod rest and go, that was about right. And I'll go, and I know it wasn't about right.
It was about right.
It was about right.
I have to say I'm laughing because I've had that exact same scenario when I fished with my dad many times. He's given me that look and I've gone, yeah, bang on, mate.
Really?
And he's gone, no.
He gets the Damo stare.
and that is the difference, is that I have developed what's called a carp fishing conscience. And it's either right or it's wrong. And I cannot climb into that sleeping bag at night knowing I've not clipped up and dropped it on the spot. I get to that sleeping bag and about 20 seconds later I have to get out and have to redo it. And the difference between people who are successful consistently and the people who are not successful consistently is working hard at it. And that's the great thing about carp fishing. Nobody can take that off you. If you work hard at it, you can be great.
Yeah.
You can't be Lewis Hamilton overnight, but you can be a great carp angler if you work.
Yeah. You just need to gradually increase your level of consistency as well, don't you?
Find out what works for you. Don't change your rods every year. Don't change your reels every year, because that rod and reel should be an extension of your arm. And so you get used to casting almost blind. You get used to playing fish almost blind. And all of a sudden, you've brought the next step up to... And all of a sudden, you're having to learn to cast again. And you change your main line for no reason other than this has got a brighter colour on it. And all of a sudden, I can't feel that lead down. and you develop the starting points, and you then start fine-tuning them. Because if you change everything, which one of the 10 things gave you the bite?
Do you know what? I think it was a little bit easier for us in the day as well when we didn't have as much. We didn't have as much choice, did we? So we tend to come out of this a little bit more. We think a little bit more straightforwardly as well.
I think it's better now. The last thing I want to do is playing the fish, thinking that hook's going to go bang. I don't ever play a fish cast out and think this might work, this might not work. Whereas in the olden days, you would hook a fishing weed and think, I hope this stays on. Oh, it didn't, and you wouldn't be surprised. It'd rain. You think those buzzers have probably got 20 minutes before. They start squeaking. You knew fish were out of range. Nowadays, it's absolutely fantastic. It's just about being able to see. See the wood, the trees?
Wood through the trees.
The trees. Yeah. When I worked in court, the best lawyers would only ask 2 or 3 questions. They would only ask the questions they knew the answers to, because you can ask 30 questions, 29 can be brilliant, and the last question can completely undo your case. And obviously in court, one of my specialities was getting money off people for not paying the fines. And I knew the 5 questions to ask everybody. And I used to get them to fill the means form in, and they would write down that they got a mobile phone, etc., etc. And I would say, you got a mobile phone? Yes, bingo. And you would say, how much is your mobile phone? Oh, £30 a month. That's great, yeah. And
good deal.
Do you go out for a drink? Yeah, I don't have more than 3 or 4 pints a night. And I would go,
know where this is going.
Yeah, and I would say, right, so you can't pay 20 a month on your fines? No. Well, you've just told me you can. And all of a sudden, you could see that light bulb going out. And the question, it's the same with carp fishing. If you can see the wood from all the other bits and pieces, whether it should be a kicker that's bright or a kicker that's dark, whether it should be a semi-stiff hook length or a stiff, it's all beside. You need to have a starting point and work from it. Otherwise, you get totally confused.
Yeah, great advice. Yeah, listen to that. Did you feel a little bit obliged to have to respond to all of these letters? So is it that guilt thing as well? That if I've done it with all these people, if I leave this one out,
I can't do it. It's the same card. I cannot cast out that hook knowing it's not. It's just something. Maybe the more you do it, the more you develop that conscience. And
you don't think you got a bit of OCD there?
Probably OCD. Yeah. I just remember nobody's more important than anybody else. I'm not any more important than anybody else. And nobody's any more important than me. Slash or Kiss, they're famous. It doesn't make them as individuals more important than me.
Yeah, they're not carp anglers.
No, they're not carp anglers. What are they ever?
What's Slash?
He's never been on the front of Carp World yet. And to me, every single person I write to is as important as the other person. So if I decide I can't be bothered to write to him or her, he's no less important than everybody else. And that could be that one person who just doesn't get the letter back and is crushed. I don't want them to look at me and think, well, he's not the bloke I expected to be. So, a lot of it is about preserving your own reputation. I want to walk around those carp shows and I haven't got anybody that goes, you gave me a bit of bad advice or you couldn't be bothered. So, maybe it is OCD, yeah.
Well, standout letters. So there must be a few that stand out for you.
Oh God, letters. Yeah. I've had. You get the insulting ones. I got. Well, one of the best letters was from Chris Yates, and when I'd done a long time ago, probably 20 years ago, when I was fishing maggots and sweet corn, you'd have the second hook. With the you cut the barb off it and you put 5 or 6 maggots on it.
Oh yeah.
And you'd hang that under your normal hook.
Yeah.
And so it was a double hook, but you'd cut the barb off it. And that's not uncommon.
Yeah.
And I publicised this and it worked for me. And I got this Black Gaff Award from Chris Yates.
Did you?
Yeah. And I've had letters. I mean, I couldn't even bring them to show, who the effing hell, we are the Colne Valley boys. Who do you think you are? Real good insulting ones. And then you get letters from somebody that would say, thanks, I was really down. So you get loads of letters. And they make me smile. Nobody's ever upset me with a letter because, as my dad said, if you look in the mirror and what somebody says is not true, it can't hurt. So if somebody writes a letter, writes to me and says, you didn't bother, you were terrible to me at the conference, and it didn't happen, that has no effect. I'd respond to and say, sorry, Matt, I didn't see you. But if I know that's a lie, it doesn't hurt me.
No.
What's not true can't hurt you.
Yeah.
So, there is a, loads of letters, good one, and you take them in good stead.
Yeah, people need to listen to that. Actually, it's true. You know, if it's not true, it can't hurt you.
No. Somebody says to me, "You're obese," and I'm not obese, then it doesn't hurt me. But if somebody says, "By that tan's a bit dodgy, you look a bit like Dave Dickinson," I think, I do look a bit like Dave Dickinson. I'll maybe have to tone the down. It's like Ron Seal. It does exactly what it says in the tin. And so if somebody says, "You were a bit of a smart ass there. You were a bit puffing your chest out." I think, to be honest, I probably did come across a bit that way. And like Danny said, and I thought was brilliant on his first podcast, he talked about improving yourself as a person. And I always try to improve. We can't. Sometimes we get it completely wrong. I'm as fallible as anybody. But I've always tried to improve myself. And when I do things wrong, there's no point blaming other people. I'm that person, I'm that person that stayed in the dodgy relationship. I'm that person that acted a prat. And either you accept it and grow, or you go, "No, it's not my fault."
Yeah. What was your analogy about swimming closer to the island or something? You were saying.
I was on about, I've been in bad relationships and I've done stupid things and etc. And I've talked to people like life coaching for people, and I've talked to them about various things. I said it's like when you know that you need to not do something anymore. It's like either being on a ship that's sinking or a volcano where the lava's coming down. And you know that you're normally safe there, but you know it's going to get you. So you get in that lifeboat and you row, or that boat, and you get about 50 yards. But because you can't see where the next island is, you think, "I don't know where it is," so you come back. But that lava's still coming down, and that lifeboat, that boat is still sinking. And at some stage, you have to say to yourself, "Do you know what? I don't know the ultimate conclusion, but I'm going to have to be brave and do it." So sometimes you have to step away from your local waters. Nobody's going to guarantee that you're going to catch a 30-pounder. But whenever you fish waters with only 20-pounders in it, you ain't catching a 30. Whatever you do, what all your mates are doing, whatever you say, "Actually, I don't like that, but all my mates like it, so I'll do it." And so whenever you actually say, "It's not everybody else's fault, it's my fault," then you grow as a person. So as an angler, it's no good blaming Alan Blair because your scope rod couldn't hit 100 yards, or blaming Danny because your size 8 hook opened up in weed. It's actually the you that bought it, the you that used it, and you used it inappropriately. So I've always realised whenever things have gone wrong for me, 99% of the time, it's Julian Cundiff's fault. Not anybody else's fault, it's Julian Cundiff's fault.
Yeah, that's a maturity thing as well, isn't it? I mean, as you get older, and once you unlock that and you're able to see the wood through the trees, it's not just carp fishing, it's everything else in your life that can suddenly start to change as well, isn't it?
I had that at 16 because obviously, 16, when did you do it? Yeah, O-levels at 16. I remember O-levels were like in June. And that period, April to June, that was like fishing period. That was rolling bait period. That was reading about carp fishing. That was going to concerts. And I remember doing my O-levels, and, you go in and you get the thing, you open the, that can't be right. That's 6 Ds, which were fails, and 2 Cs, which were passes. That can't be right. I don't fail. And I remember my mum at the time, she wasn't a vicar at the time. She worked as a registrar, and I went to see her, and I'm like, "Oh, Mum, I've failed all my exams." And my mum said the right things. Then she just put her arm around me and she said, "Do you know what, Julian? We can do everything for you, but we can't do the exams for you." And I realised then it wasn't the fact that these exams were too hard. It wasn't the fact that my mum and dad hadn't helped me revise. The only person who could have been revising was me. And so that was at 16, and I realised I can either blame the exam board and say it wasn't the right questions, say the school wasn't teaching me properly, or go, "Do you know what? I was too busy reading Carp World or whatever. I was too busy chasing girls and motorbikes, things like that, rather than revising." And I realised then that I needed to grow up. And every time things have gone wrong in my life, I realised actually it's not Kevin Nash's fault. It's not Tim Paisley's fault. It's not ex-girlfriend's fault. It's actually my fault. And in carp fishing terms, stop blaming everybody else and actually go, "Do you know what? If I want to catch a 30-pounder, I need to get my test passed. I need to actually go down where these fish are." It's no good blaming Tom Maker for catching all these big fish in linear. Just get on your bike and do it. And so once you accept it's in your power, you can everything's achievable.
Yeah. You had a very wise mother, didn't you?
I did, yeah,
you
yeah.
did, and
Yeah.
to get that instilled at a young age as well.
Yeah. I mean, she'd only told me about girls a bit. Well, she did.
Did she?
Yeah.
Not enough help there.
No, it took a long time before I realised that I should, think with my brain and not with my eyes.
So what have you learned about girls over the years then, Julian?
Yeah, well, first of all, that carp fishing is not a great puller for girls.
No. Do you know a guy that I fish with? He's on the other rotor, actually. He was on a dating app. And he was getting on really, really well with this girl, and it was all going well. And after a week, they started exchanging pictures, and he goes and sends her a fish picture.
That's the end. That's it.
Never heard from her again. Yeah.
Not you, Toby, is it?
I think me with girls as well. Yeah, well, that's why Toby's got loads of girlfriends, and I'm struggling to find a girlfriend at the moment.
Well, what I've learnt about girls is that if the right one comes along, the right one comes along, and you can choose them with your eyes, but you've also got to use your brain.
Do you really think that?
Yeah.
That every girl, attractive girl.
No. I think there are attractive girls that you will end up married, but I think when you're between the age of 16 and about 25, for everyone that you choose that you end up marrying and stay happy ever after, I think the majority of them are chosen on vodka and self-deluded arrogance. Can you imagine? You go in these clubs. I mean, luckily for me, it wasn't, because I was too tight to even go in a club. But you go in these clubs and you meet a girl, and she gets all that, flava, blah 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 blah, and then you say to her, "Yeah, I go fishing every Friday, and I come home on Sunday, and I spend most of my money on fishing tackle, and then I throw it in the water, and I don't eat them." Yeah, that's not going to work, mate.
No, it's
you
not.
can kid yourself, it might, but it ain't.
Yeah.
Not for a 17 to a 25-year-old girl. She's not going to go, "Wow, you're in carp world. Wow, I must tell my friends. What, you're in carp talk this week? What, you can get leads from Korda. Wow."
Oh, unless you're Dovey.
Yeah, but he's young, and in fact, he's off the it's too late.
Well, he's off. No, he is now.
He's done.
He's
done.
He's not married yet, but
he's done, mate. Soon. He's grown a beard. He's done. He's done. His best times are well gone.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, my ex-girlfriends I've always pulled fishing in quite a long time into the relationship, so it's always been. So you were out fishing yesterday, weren't you?
Yeah. Before
carry on.
I've got to talk about being young, because when you're young, you sort of and you think practical carp fishing came out. All of a sudden, people recognise me. And I remember once going to this fishing shop in Bolton, and it was when I was with Nutrabaits, and we had this stand, and we were doing all the giveaways, and I got a big pile of books, and kids were coming, to get their books signed by me, and there was this girl, probably considerably younger than me, so that could be she could have been in her 40s, and this girl kept looking across at me, and I said to the guys on the stand, "That girl, she wants an autograph and a picture, guys." "No way, look at her age, look at she doesn't know you." I said, "I'm telling you, mate, she wants," and I sort of gave her the smile, and just went, and she sort of walked across, and I'm like, as you do, the chest came out, and "Hi, darling." "Oh, hi." I says, would you like a book?" "Oh, yes, please." I'm like, "There you go, guys." And I said, "Who's it to?" And she went, "Oh, it's for my mother." "For your mother?" And I thought, yep, that's it, Jules. Time to wind it in.
Yeah, well,
done.
You probably
Game over,
Jules, haven't you? Yeah, you're married now, anyway.
No, not married. No, engaged.
You're engaged.
Yeah, engaged.
Okay, but you've been engaged for a while.
Been engaged for many years. Absolutely fantastic. I'm the happiest man ever.
Yeah. So you got there in the end.
I got there in the end. Yeah, I got there in the end. Even my dad said, "This is the one, son." He says, "Well, I'll say it on it." My dad, when we met Ros, and she's absolutely gorgeous, and my dad said after we met her and she'd gone away, he says, "Well, son, thank goodness it's not some bandy-legged blonde tart." And I thought, "Dad, you can't say that." And I thought, "You're right, Dad. You're right. This is the one."
Oh, excellent. Good. So sorry, we were talking about you going out fishing, weren't we?
Yeah. Well, of course, when you invited me down here, obviously it's a long way from Doncaster. It's a long way from Doncaster. So I mixed it in with some fishing with my friend Joe Turnbull, and Joe's great. I mean, he lives in Essex, and people say, why don't you live down here? Well, there's a lot more pressure on your waters. My waters are not pressurised. The fish are not as big, but there's not the pressurised, and you have to make that choice. But Joe, of course, living here in Essex, is absolutely fantastic. He'll say, I've got some waters, but they're only fish up to £30, or it's not particularly great. There's nothing more than 42, and it's like, what? And so we went fishing yesterday, one of his local lakes, and we had a great day. And Joe's so laid back. He's one of your guys, one of the Korda guys, and I don't go fishing with many people because I need to, you take people fishing and all they want to do is show you pictures of the fish and they want you to tie them rigs. And me and Joe, we're friends, and there's no competition, and we just go fishing and it's just fun. And, we went fishing yesterday, caught a couple of fish, had a bit of fun. And you know what? It was just great. I just love coming down to Essex and catching carp. They're bigger down here, but there's more people doing it.
Yeah, definitely. And you were saying as well that you and Joe were fishing different tactics as well.
Yeah, Joe was fishing over a spreader bait at he's fishing further out where a lot of the fish was showing, whereas I was fishing down the margins on the right hand margin. Because when we got there, we got in the swim, and you go in a swim, and you've got to remember that when you're fishing, that swim has been fished hundreds of times. Definitely hundreds of times. And yes, there are anglers who haven't got a clue, but there are anglers who know. And on the left-hand side were the snags, the obvious 2 or 3 snags sticking out. And that was anybody who went in that swim was always going to put one down the left-hand side to the snags. So Joe went in the left. I went in the right-hand side. Now, it's still a margin, whether it's left or right, it's still a margin. Now, there were no snags on the right-hand side, but what I did is thought, well, if I was a fish, that left-hand area, they're always getting pressurised because that's the obvious spots to caster. The right-hand side, you wouldn't normally go in if you were fishing the margins because it was the open margin. And all I did, I thought, well, if I was a fish coming down this margins, I know where I'd be spooky and I know where I'd be more confident, because I would say 90 times out of 100, the main rods are down the left-hand side into that area. And I fished my rods down the right-hand side into that area, and I got the better fish. And Joe fished one straight out. In fact, he had a bite straight away down the left-hand margin, a bite straight away, a double, and I cast, and he cast one out in the middle, and there were fish showing at literally about 50 yards, and he was topping up with free offerings, whereas I fished on the right-hand side over, larger, sort of a fish meal based thing, and I had the better fish on the left-hand side. And it wasn't about catching those fish. It was what I say to people when I go carp fishing. When I go carp fishing and I see people do things and catch carp, I never ever put it down to luck. I never go, it's a lucky cast, because you get a bloke who turns up on the water and he casts out and it drops 20 feet short of the spot, because you have to kiss the tree every time, and he drops short of it because he doesn't know the water, or he fishes a different spot, and all of a sudden he catches the biggest fish in the lake, or he does well, and people go, that was lucky. I think, no, all we're doing is going through the same old, it's the same routine. And that guy, purely by accident, often has dropped in a different spot and he's caught the bigger fish, because the bigger fish know that any free offerings underneath that tree are dead dodgy. But most people are rubbish with catapults and throwing sticks, and for every 2 or 3 that go under the tree, there's 10 that drop short, because you watch people catapult and they're hopeless. And that guy who has dropped that bait short, that's a safe bait, because that's in 22 free offerings, whereas the hook bait, which has just caught the tree, is one of 2 or 3. And you sometimes have to think outside the box. Carp don't materialise in your swim. They don't just go, boom. Where are the carp where you're fishing for them, and where are they likely to be? Where would I be if I was a carp? They want to feed, but they also, on anything other than, runs waters, they also do show a degree of common sense. And you know that this water has probably got 30 night tickets, 400 day tickets. So the average bloke chucks his bait in the edge because he's not going to be coming back. So he just chucks it in. The majority of the bait goes in the edges, and those fish know that when it gets dark, they're in the edges. And the left-hand edge is the pressurised edge, the right-hand edge is the better edge.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just throw a single tiger or something down there, and
absolutely, yeah.
But the edge always. I mean, when we were kids, it's like the bigger ones are always in the edge. Do you find adapting and changing more important nowadays than it used to be?
No, because most people are still hopeless. Most people still won't use a sharpened hook. Most people, I will turn up on a lake, and I do well, no, I don't do tuitions. I've not done any paid tuitions because that's people's businesses, and that's their businesses. I'll do charity tuitions, and it's the same 10 mistakes people make all the time. They walk round and they don't look properly. They will literally look 10 seconds in every swim. They don't climb trees. They don't bring sharpened hooks. Their leads are too heavy. They can't feel the bottom. They have all sorts of different hook baits. They don't bring the baits I told them to bring. They make too much noise. They sit too closer. So I don't think it is hard. It's harder on very pressurised waters, but your average waters are not harder because people still want to fish at 70%. I'm not being critical. People still want to fish at 70%. And anybody who does something a little bit better, they learn to feel the lead down. They learn to use a sharpened hook. They learn to sit back. They learn to climb trees. They learn that where the fish are now is probably not going to be when you're set up. They learn to bait accurate with a catapult. How many people say, this catapult is crap and the baits are everywhere? Just make one yourself that works. Learn to spod properly. So yeah, there's a lot more 70%ers out there, so they will catch fish. But if you are the 30%er, carp fishing is easier.
Yeah, do you know what? I learnt a lot as well watching people over the years, and actually some experienced guys. One guy actually that I know, old boy now, Roger the Radish.
Roger.
He always fishes the same way on the lake. Always fishes the same way. Quite crude. He might be listening. He won't listen to this.
Korda, who are they? That Denny Fairbrass.
Puts no free bait out or anything like that. But do you know what? His photo album is very, very impressive. He doesn't catch a lot of fish, but when he does catch them, he catches the big unusual ones all the time. And it's not necessarily completely by design, but he does fish differently. And having people on the show and talking to the common thing, you talk to Dovey, you talk to Daryl, not all the time, but the majority of the time, they end up doing something a little bit different to everybody else. Yeah. So they're doing all the things that you're saying well, but it tends to be a little bit different as well.
The more pressurised the water is, being great is not good. You have to do something different. So on the majority of waters at Korda, people who watch the Korda podcast, people who watch the Thinking Tackle, the Urban Banks, for the majority of those people, huge majority, just doing things better is enough. If you have a sharpened hook, you are doing something that 10 other people either side of you probably not doing. If you can feel the lead down properly, you're doing something that probably 7 people either side of you not doing. If you can actually bait accurately, you're doing something that 5 people each side of you are not doing properly. So on the majority of waters, that bit is massive. That will give you huge things. But there then comes a time when you're fishing next to guys who are doing everything
I've noticed
the same as you equally, and then all of a sudden you actually have to do something different.
I noticed this on this trip that we went on that we were talking about. So we all had one end of the lake, and there weren't a lot of fish showing there initially, but by midday there were a few more fish showing. Then by the early afternoon, it became evident that there were a lot of fish there. We absolutely caned them. So everyone from Korda, basically, we're all experienced anglers. And we just absolutely caned them for about 4 or 5 hours. But then
dead.
They were showing like there were 4 or 5 fish coming out of the water at the same time. And then I caught 3 in about an hour, and I just thought, and I caught some really nice ones as well. And I was actually thinking, do you know what? I want this to slow down a little bit. This is too much. Why did I say that?
Imagine being my age.
I know. It's like, but God, I regret wishing for that now. Anyway, they disappeared out of there. And they basically went underground after that. I think if you had the same amount of anglers in there on a normal weekend with one really good angler just doing what we were doing, not saying, he would have probably caught for the whole weekend and had a really big hit.
There's only so many times those fish will be caught. And it takes me back, because people moan nowadays about, fishing in September, October, November is not as good as it used to be. What happened to the autumn feed up? Well, in the olden days, fishing started in June and it tailed off in December. Nowadays, carp are pressurised from March onwards. They're getting good bait March onwards. They're getting hooked March onwards. So the thing is nowadays that, there's only so many times a carp will be caught. And the more people that know how to feather a lead down, use a sharpened hook, sit up in the middle of the night. I don't want to turn up at a lake full of Adam Pennings, Terry Earns, Dave Lanes, Darryl Pecks. That's the last thing I want, because those fish are going to be ultra hard to catch, because you have got the cream of the cream, because it's not that they're better than anybody else, but they do everything else so good. So, carp do learn. There's only so many times a carp will learn, get caught before it learns and changes its feeding behaviour.
Absolutely right.
But not for the majority. The majority of people who watch these kind of podcasts, doing something better than somebody else will always catch you more carp. It's only when you are really fishing for big fish on elite waters, low stocked, that some of the real advanced tactics come on. And when often kids talk to me about, I say, who's your greatest inspiration? And, they'll say, Terry Earn or Dave Lane. And you just know that copying Terry or Dave is just not going to work on the majority of waters these fish that they fish. You need to look at what maybe Tom Maker does, or Mark Pitchers, or me, because we are fishing those kind of waters. It's great to be inspired by Terry and Dave Lane and Darryl, but if they're not fishing your kind of waters, that information is not going to catch. You have to look at the information you're getting and sift it.
Do you know what? You mentioned Tom Maker there, actually. And obviously,
he's not going to be fishing any waters I fish. He's just a machine. He's young.
He's an absolute machine, and I know that we've lent on him. Certain people have lent on him for a bit of advice. But it's interesting that he caught his first 40-pounder out of linear only like a month or so ago. So there's probably, and Tom probably thinks as well, there's probably something to learn from that. So even these guys that are catching,
you catch loads. How do you isolate the one big fish? I mean, look at Terry. Terry is one of the great, one of the best big fish anglers, but you then have to sort of break it down. When he went to Wasing, he fished a water which probably had a big stock of fish for him. Normally he fishes low stock waters and catches the bigger fish, because if there's 10 fish in there and you get a bite, it's 1 in 10, it's a big one. But when he fished Wasing, I'm not sure, but there's a lot of fish in there. And I think he caught well over 100 carp before he caught the big one. And I say to people, none of us, no well-known angler has, superpowers. They don't have superpowers, and that's what's great about carp fishing. Terry doesn't have a superpower where he can walk onto Brasenose 1 and target the only 30-pounder. And you need to believe in yourself that you can be as good as anybody. I'm not saying you can be as good as Terry, but you can be a better carp angler. And so, Terry has no... They don't sit there and say, I can smell carp in the wind. And it's experience that teaches that. So when a bloke turns up and finds the carp straight away, it's not that he's got a magical power, it's that he's got 10, 15 years experience on you. You cannot buy it. Korda, Nash, Fox cannot sell experience. They can sell you the product of years of experience, but they can't teach you watercraft and that thing that says to you, that wasn't close enough, or I do need to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning, I do need to move in the rain. That's what can't be sold, that motivation and drive. That's the bit that makes you run every morning. And then you don't become great overnight or better overnight. It's a product of hard work, and that's why carp fishing is great. Hard work will pay off.
There's been some notable friendships in your life. I would say specifically Kevin Nash and Tim Paisley. Do you want to talk about these relationships? Why they've lasted the test of time?
Well, because I know when to keep my mouth shut.
Really?
I mean, Tim was my first friendship in carp fishing. I remember Tim Paisley. That goes back to 1996, and obviously that, as I said, that
86.
Sorry, 86. That goes back to 86 when I sent that first article in about fishing on Drax called "Who's Kidding Who," which was a guy who was talking about a 27 when there's only 19, and Tim responded to me. And the thing with Tim is he kept responding with letters. So I'd, ask him things and he'd respond. And then he said, he soon picked up, and Tim is very astute. He was good at identifying the strengths of people, a bit like Danny Allen, people like, he could identify the strengths of people, and he knew I was in love with carp fishing, which is great, but I was also in love with the written word and writing. And he invited me over to his place, and we discussed various writings for Carp Fisher, and I got involved that way. And it obviously got me involved in the Carp Society. I go to slideshows and meet him at slideshows, and that's how my friendship with Tim developed. And then obviously I ended up as a features editor for Carp Fisher, then I ended up as sort of the joint editor of Carp World, and I ended up as the joint editor of Crafty Carper. So I was never the most, Tim is a brilliant writer, whereas I was probably the best gatherer of material. I knew enough people, I knew how to get things out of people, and I was good at that, so we were a good team. He was brilliant with English, brilliant with language and interviewing people, whereas I could get blood out of a stone at time. I could get Richie McDonald to do stuff. I knew enough people, and that was just because I knew when to keep my mouth shut. I knew who I needed to say yes sir, no sir to. I knew how to make things happen, and that's how my friendship with Tim came along. People want stuff too quickly nowadays. People want to be, famous overnight, or want to be a Korda consultant overnight, or want to be on Thinking Tackle overnight. And I've realised it was a slow process. I was that guy who was at Carp Society steering committee meetings who people would go, who's he? He's a friend of Tim. So, that's how it worked with Tim.
What did you recognise in Tim?
A drive. My old boss at work, Mr. Rawnsley, he taught me that the boss not only does everything that you do, but can do it as well, if not better. And so he'd be first into work, he'd be last to leave work. And in many ways, when I became higher up in the company, I made sure that I could do any job that anybody else wanted me to do, at least as good. And with Tim, there was nothing I could do that he couldn't do better. And it creates that ethos, that drive, which was, I saw that in Tim as somebody who loved carp fishing, but not just catching carp. He was as much in love with the history of carp fishing and writing as he was in catching carp. Because carp fishing is not just catching carp for me. I love the written word. I love the history of carp fishing. I love the meetings. I love meeting people. It's not just catching carp.
So it was his writing really that first drew you to his attention to Tim.
Yeah. I read his writings in Course Angler when Tim wrote as Matthew Black. Course Angler,
right?
And then obviously with Carp Fisher, and he was a guy who wrote back to me. And maybe if Tim Paisley hadn't written back to me, maybe things would have been completely different.
Was it a lot of letters you were writing to?
Letters, and I've got, obviously I've got copies of them.
You showed me some of those.
Tim wrote back to me. His writing was as bad as mine, so I'd be like, I can get the gist of that letter, Tim, but I'm not quite sure. But Tim was very driven as well, very driven. he started Carp World in his 50s. Just as I'm thinking of winding down, he was winding up.
Do you know, it's interesting when you say, looking up to people. I think being in my 40s now and starting carp fishing when I did, Tim would have been in his late 40s.
Yeah. But I think he's 82 or 83 now.
It's amazing, isn't it? And I think now for a 40-year-old to look at that, you think, life can it looked like, did Tim's life really start to get going in his 40s?
Tim's, I suppose in his 50s. Carp World and things like that. And he was so driven, he made a decision. He said, I am going to do this. I am going to, publish Carp World. I think, with Carp World, he offered it actually first to the Carp Society to have a newsstand Carp Society magazine. And they didn't think that was the right thing. So Tim went quarterly with Carp World, bi-monthly, monthly. So he had such a drive. He has the drive that people like Danny and people, I don't have that. I know at what limit I want to. It's about being happy, and I didn't have the desire to do that. I just like to relax and go carp fishing. Tim is driven to achieve more, like Danny is, and Alan and Kevin. I don't have that drive. I have an all-encompassing life in different areas.
It demonstrated how astute he was as well, though, wasn't it? Because he could recognise that you were a good information gatherer, and
he was a guy who gave the ball. Yeah. He was a guy who gave you the ball, but you had to run with it. And in carp fishing terms, I have given many guys through work through you Carp Fisher, Carp World, Crafty Carper. I've given many people the ball, and for every Ian Poole, Steve Briggs, who's run with it, plenty have dropped it and I've never heard from again. Everybody gets chance. It's a matter of taking that chance. And how you succeed is most people get a chance, but most people drop the ball.
Yeah. What was it like working around the Carp World family? Because you were very much part of that as well. He had Mary was working.
Yeah, I mean,
and the daughters.
It was a different world in the courts because we weren't civil servants. Getting a day off here, there, and everywhere wasn't a problem. And I would go across to Anglia Publications. We'd look at what the next magazine was going to be. I'd gather material. I'd go across in the week. Sometimes I'd go across earlier, and it was great. There was Pippa, there was Mary. I think at one stage there was about 15 people working for Anglia Publications. In the very early days, Tim would say, look, this, Mr. X has sent an article in. There's just nothing but pictures of him with fish. Just go in the cupboard, literally the cupboard, and find some pictures of a water that's nondescript and that's how
really?
That's how it was in the very early days, and that was absolutely incredible to see, and to get material from my peers. I've got an article here from Peter Springate. I've written to Peter Broxup, and he says, come down to Savvy. I had the greatest childhood in carp fishing ever.
Yeah, I've got great memories of that magazine.
But you can't.
Do you remember the story about a guy used to write these stories, these articles about a haunted lake?
Yeah.
And God, they were like really. They scared the life out of us when we were fishing.
Yeah. Tim would identify good writers.
Yeah.
There are people who are carp fishing that write, and there are writers who go carp fishing. And some of the people who used to write in there were proper writers.
Who was that? I can't remember the guy's name.
I can't remember the guy, but yeah, Tim. When you think of all the people who've appeared in Carp World for the first time, there are a lot of people who owe their livings to the board. Tim very much runs that down and says no. Tim has given a lot of people a start in carp fishing. He is what I call the Bernie Eccleston of carp fishing. Yeah. He's given so many of us the ball, and he's a very dominant personality, but he's given many of us a chance. And he's still almost Mr. Paisley to me. He's still, when he comes in, I still feel slightly awkward, slightly as though I don't feel on equal terms. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I still think of him as somebody I look up to, not particularly about the catching fish, but I look up to and what he's contributed to carp fishing, because he is the Dick Walker of my generation. What Tim has contributed to carp fishing is huge.
Yeah, here, definitely agree with that. So you've still got a nice personal relationship with him now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah, yes. He still puts me in my place.
Yeah, I'm sure he does.
He still makes sure I know my position in the greater things.
Yeah,
and, he's still, we're still friends, and we still get the Christmas cards. I still see him at shows. He still ribs me for being frugal with my money, for not having the heating on, and not drinking and not smoking. And when we stay at hotels, I'll take the water out the room to the bar. I won't buy. I'm not going to spend all that money at the bar. And as a well-known carp angler, and I said this to Ross, and she absolutely found it hysterical, but also embarrassing. I said, if you're well known in carp fishing, if you stand next to a bar long enough, somebody will buy you a drink. And she says, no, honestly. So I took her down at one of the shows, Five Lakes. We stood next to the bar, and I stood there for probably 20 seconds. Hello, Jules, you want a drink? I says, absolutely. And one for the lady as well. And she says, I'm horrified by how tight you are. And Tim is the same. Tim is like, unbelievable, I'm just frugal.
Yeah, right.
Northerner.
Nothing wrong with that.
That's
why you got more money than me.
Wow.
Yeah. So how does that compare to Kevin Nash?
Well, Kevin Nash, again, a similar sort of relationship. I sort of knew Nash. He was not like the Rod Hutchins and Andy Little, but he was another name that I knew of, because Kevin didn't write a lot. So Kevin Nash's influence was more of the gear. The people I was influenced by were the writers rather than the fishermen. And when in the late 80s, I caught the first 30-pounder out of Motorway Pond, and I got a personal letter from Kevin Nash saying, congratulations, Jules, on that. I've noticed that you've done really well and such and such. And he was the head of the Daiwa Carp team at the time, because Nash didn't do rods, reels, bite alarms, and Daiwa wanted to get that big in this country, and Kevin was the head of it. So he was the head of that team, and he said, I'm really impressed by what you've done. Would you like to be part of Carp Team Daiwa? So would I like 3 SS3000s for free?
Yes, please.
Would I like an AKN for free? Yeah, that's 2 out of 3. Would I like 3 Sensatrons?
I don't want the sensortrons, but I'll take the rod and the reels.
It was 3 out of 3, mate. It was either 3 out of 3 or 2 out of 3.
Was it?
Yeah. So yeah, and you know
that was a bit of a coup for him, wasn't it? Getting that Daiwood deal as well, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And he really, he got a lot of the best known anglers on board, the very famous adverts, and I spent time with him, and I noticed with Kevin again, he was a man who people. When you see Tim and Danny, this ebullient character that can be quite intimidating for people, and people take it as arrogance. And with Kevin, you used to see him at the shows and you think he was arrogant. He was very shy. And the more you got to know him, the more I realised that he was very loyal, and Tim's very loyal. No matter what, Tim will stand up for his staff and his friends. He may well bollock them in private, but he stood up for them in public. And with Kevin, no matter what, I mean, I was a Nutribaits user, and Kevin's like, you need to get off Nutribaits, you need to be on Nash. And I says, Kevin, I'm loyal to Nutribaits. I understand your bait's good. And Kevin said he had more respect for the fact that I didn't get paid by him, but stood by Nutribaits, than if I'd said, yeah, Kev, just pay me to use my bait. And
did you ever think, do you know what, I'd rather use Nash baits than Nutribaits at the moment? Was there a period during your...
I was always happy using the bait. If I actually woke up one day and thought, do you know what, that bait isn't as good as another bait I'm using, I would change.
I mean, I love Nutribaits as well. I used to use it.
Big fish mix, trigger, Biolux. Absolutely brilliant. And it's the same with tackle. If I wake up and think that what I'm using is bettered by somebody else, I will, because I'm the one sat behind the rods. So I use what I think is the best line, bait, hooks. You come and see my gear, it's exactly what I say. I don't fish. I'm not a Ford employee. I have to drive a Ford Fiesta. I use what I want to use. And with Nutribaits, I was happy using what I did use, and I was also very loyal because I wouldn't want to say to Bill, by the way, I'm jumping ships because I've got another $2,000 here, $1,000 here, and I think you get more respect for that than you do for jumping for another £500.
Yeah.
And Kevin was impressed with that, and
but he was astute enough to recognise that as well, wasn't he? That I mean, if you're being loyal to them, you're going to be loyal to him as well.
And I've got all the letters from Kevin, saying, we've been friends for 30 years, and even when I had to leave Nash and join Fox because that was part of the deal with the Angling Times at the time, he had no problem with that, and he understood why I stood with people. And it never at any stage did he say, you need to leave Nutribaits or whatever. And, I've always been loyal to the people I've been loyal to. I was with Daiwa until they started making luggage, which was a conflict with Nash. I was with Nutribaits until it got to the stage of their evolution where they could not afford to have bait rolled for me for free, and it wasn't a matter that Nash were going to pay me, it was what I was confident in, and I've never left one company for another money for a penny ever. It's never been about money.
Yeah, so is he always okay with you being like, I mean, I have to thank Nash for letting you come on the podcast,
always.
I suppose.
I mean, always. Kevin has always been straight up with me. I mean, Kevin, I've had him at the house, we've had great things. And I think Kevin, again, is a people person. Kevin, like I'm sure Danny has and Tim has been let down by people. Kevin has had friends who have been friends of his because of the gear and the opportunities. And then another one has come and they've said, goodbye, Kevin. And eventually you then realise who your friends are. And I'm not going to sell Kevin down the road for an extra $2,000, $5,000 or $20,000. And I swear to you, if somebody said, come to us and we'll pay you £20,000 a year more, I'm not going to do it, because my friendship with Kevin and my reputation is worth more than the money. I'm lucky in that I don't need that money. I accept that. If I needed that money for medical issues, that's different. But to me, reputation and Kevin's friendship is far more important than pound, shilling and pence.
Yeah. The other thing, though, is, I mean, you're a bit of an example to, without being patronising, but you're a good example to these people that do keep jumping ship and going from company to company. Yeah. Because, like I say, it just shows that you can kind of be everybody's friend and get a little bit of everything, and you don't need to disappear somewhere just for the sake of being a bit greedier.
No, I don't want to walk into any carp show and think I can't talk to Ali Hamidi, I can't talk to Lewis Porter, I can't talk to Terry Hearn, because I was with them and I jumped ship and I'm a bit embarrassed. I'm probably not everybody's flavour at the moment, but I would like to think that all the people I've grown up with, the Springgates, the Hutchinsons, the Malins and all that, I'm no different than I was when I met them. And that's why it's so important when you talk to me about, writing letters. It's so important that when I see a kid, he doesn't look at me and go, why didn't you answer me back? What he thinks about my carp catching pro, prowess does not bother me whatsoever.
Yeah.
I'm happy with what I've caught. And he's obviously happy enough that he's written to me for advice. The fact that somebody else has caught 50 more 40-pounders than me, it makes no difference whatsoever to me at all.
But have you always been good generally at being able to maintain good relationships with people?
Yeah, I would say generally. I mean, obviously I've dropped the ball a few times, but generally I would say that one thing I did learn is you have to be able to say no, and sometimes you can't be everybody's friend. Sometimes you have to be able to say no to people when you really want to say no, but it's easier to say yes. And that's something as you get older, you realise that sometimes saying no it doesn't get easier, it just gets later. And sometimes you think, well, I need to knock this on the head, or I need to move on. And it's when you're younger, it's easier to say, no, not a problem at all, and think, I really, really should have said no. But I have generally been an easygoing guy that gets on with people. But yeah, I've dropped the ball on many occasions with women and work and things like that. You know, I mean, you know, one of the funniest things ever when you're talking about dropping the ball is obviously when they had that Angling Times ran that who is angling's sexiest angler,
right?
And at the time, so it was 1993, so I was 25 years ago, so I was a considerably younger man. I wasn't competing with the Tom Doves of this world, these young studs, you know.
Don't flatter him too much.
No. Well, before he grew a beard. So, and we all sent a picture off, and a picture was sent off, and lo and behold, I won the competition. But I mean, to be fair, I was in competition with Des Taylor and people like that. It wasn't an open playing field. And I won this competition. And one of the pictures they'd used was I was fishing with Andy Little at Willow Park, and it was red, absolutely boiling hot. And being a tight northern, I didn't have shorts. So I fished in my white underpants, boxer shorts. And he'd taken this picture of me with a carp. And it literally was, you could see nothing, you could just about see the shorts, but it wasn't obvious. That picture was a brilliant picture.
We've got the picture,
You've got the picture, you've got the picture.
Sorry, putting Toby on the spot, we'll carry on talking, but if you have got that picture, Tobe, if you haven't, don't worry, we'll whack it up another time.
Yeah. I'll have a quick look.
Yeah, that picture, and of course that picture was a very famous picture. Now, somehow the Daily Star picked up on that picture, and I just remember somebody rang me up and said, hey, your picture's in the Daily Star. I went, what, my picture's in the Daily Star? Yeah, you're the Fish and Chippendale. I'm like, you're joking? No, it's definitely there. And what had happened, the Daily Star, they look for stuff, and this picture had come up, and they put it in on page 5. I was the page 5 fella, because he used to do like the Sun had a page 3 girl, they had a page 5 fella, and this picture was on page 5 of me appearingly naked, and it said, he's the Fish and Chippendale. And it was like, he's got a lot to carp about, blah, 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 blah. And of course, my boss had seen it, and I get this phone call, yes, Julian, it's Mr. Rawnsley, can you pop to my office? And usually when the boss wants to see you, it's not usually say it's for a pay rise. So I get in the office, and he took his glasses off, and it reminded me of Danny talking about the bank manager, and he said, Julian, tell me it's not true. My wife tells me you are naked in the papers. And I thought, oh, my God. I said, well, I wasn't actually naked, Michael. I did have underpants on. And it wasn't like, he's like, oh, my God. You couldn't see
much, could you?
No. He said, oh, my God, I'll be the laughing stock of Justice's clerks. And I think it was fairly close to the bone about bringing them into disrepute and all that, but I think I just got away with it, and it ran its course. The Evening Post ran things, and then I was contacted by Channel 4 or Channel 5 who did On the Bed.
Yeah, Big Breakfast.
And would I like to be on the bed with Paula Yates?
Right.
And it was a question of, because, it was one of those things, you're the sexiest angler, blah, blah. And I was going to be on the bed covered in oil. I don't think it was fish feed oil or salmon oil or nod oil. Yeah, it was some kind of oil. And I spoke to my boss, and it literally was, he said, no, that is a step too far, Julian. And, of course, who did she have on the bed? Michael Hutchins. I could have been Michael Hutchins.
He might have still been alive if you had gone on that show.
If it had not been for me, I killed in excess.
You could have done, yeah.
That's a good soundbite. Julian Cundiff killed
Michael, yeah.
So, yeah, that was a funny moment.
How were you received in they must have loved that at work, surely.
Work found it highly amusing. The punters would shout about it. The girls found it highly amusing. They did poems. It was just a good laugh. It was a bit of fun. It was what was fun in 1993 that would have been politically incorrect now.
What a shame.
What a shame. It was great fun. I'd get people say, I've just been to the crapper on Three Lakes. Your picture's up there. It helps me go to the toilet. When I'm struggling to push one out, Jules, look at your picture of the toilet, gets me one out. And I got a lot of stick for it. And it was funny. And my mum found it funny. But nowadays, that would be politically... As a civil servant, if I was a lawyer now, I'd be sacked.
Yeah.
I'll be getting the pop up to my office. There's your cards. But at the time, it's part of the memories. It's all the funny things you do.
Did you get extra attention from girls after that?
Not really. No. I was my girlfriend at the time, Julie. We found it up to a point amusing, but no.
So when did it get to a point when it wasn't amusing? Then did it intensify a little bit?
No, it was a bit of a laugh, isn't it? Because in 1993, I was sort of just practical carp fishing was just coming out. I was sort of known, but I was more known for being that idiot on page 5 than catching carp. So for every person who went, great, every person went, you can't catch any big carp. So it was a sort of swings and roundabouts. It was of its time. It was funny. It was on the buses, funny, that wouldn't be quite so funny now. But it was, I look at it now and I look back with great, with affinity. It was very, very funny, I got a lot of stick for it, but it was funny. And, it didn't bring me any more women attention because I was a big fish in a small pond. I was never going to be a male model. Ever.
So the UK's press then, were they searching the banks for the next sexiest carp angler after that?
Yeah, no, I don't think there was. In fact, of course, the Angling Times never ran it. So I am still the undefeated, remaining sexiest angler.
You're always going to be sexiest.
I'm always going to be the sexiest until Angling Times run it again.
Ah, they should.
I think we've got the title for our podcast episode there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's sorted. It's
sorted, yeah. I killed in excess.
You did. all carp fishing sexiest angler. Which one, Tobe?
I'm going with the carp fishing sexiest angler.
Yeah, but there are going to be a lot of people who are going to tune in and go, they've mistitled this, mate. I'm now 56. I can't compete with the young studs of this world. I know my place.
I remember that Michael Hutchins he was a great rock star.
He was one of the personalities. He was a rock star. He was. I've got a friend, Tony Powell, in the music business, who was very high up in the music business, and he said he had like this hypnotic, absolutely hypnotic, especially for women. He had a presence about them, and it's like carp fishing or music. There are some people who have a presence about them. You can catch all the big carp in the world. You can be in every carp fishing magazine, and for some reason, you don't have that ethos, that presence, that magnetism.
It was very charismatic.
It was charismatic.
Yeah. Have you? The film's coming out soon.
Yeah.
Mystified, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It's all about him hitting his head.
And he was never the same after that.
Exactly, yeah, because he was everyone you hear, they say he was a beautiful, gentle, and creative person, and then a taxi driver punched him.
That's right, and I think he ignored it and he wanted it to go away. And he was never the same after that. So yeah,
you wonder whether that killed him as well. Apart from you, of course. But
I could never swallow a tangerine.
But no, it was interesting that. Yeah, one of my all-time favourite rock stars.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of those guys. He was. Yeah, I liked it. That wasn't. It was a little bit AO&R for me. I was more of the a bit more harder rock. But yeah, he had a walk in the room presence to him, like you see on a Bon Jovi, Kiss, it's that Michael Schumacher for Mick Hakkinen, but Michael Schumacher would walk down the road and everybody stopped talking. The same as Lewis Hamilton. Nick Heidfield's going to be stood there, Kimi Räikkönen, but if Lewis Hamilton walks down there, it's that star quality.
It's that star, but with people like him, I'm not even sure whether it was because he was a rock star. It was his whole persona, which maybe came from being a rock star, but I think he always had that.
He never made Angling Times, mate.
He never made the Angling Times. Another one. How many carp has he caught? Getting on to the old conferences, Carp Society conferences. Would you like to see that old era come back a little bit?
I miss it. I love the themed conferences, but I also have to look through the eyes of visitors. For me, conferences were best when they were themed. The Carp Society conference was a winter conference, so you'd have somebody talking about winter carp fishing. You would literally have a theme, whereas nowadays it's just 3 speakers. Why is A, B and C speaking, other than the fact they've got stands there? And this isn't a criticism of Carp, the Carp Society. All conferences seem to have lost their theme. And when conferences have a theme, to me, they're more exciting. But I've also got to put myself in the eyes of a 17-year-old Urban Banks thinking tackle angler who's going there to pick tackle up at a cheap rate. If he wants to meet Danny Fairbrass or if he wants to see Ali Hamidi, go on YouTube. In those days, if you wanted to see Chris Yates, you had to go to the Carp Society November conference. If you wanted to see the latest Titan, you had to go to the Carp Society. It's a different world. So, yes, for me, I miss those kind of conferences. But I also have to look at the traffic that would come to them. What is attractive to those people? And attractive to those people is not always what the BCSG conference where you have Chris Ball and Mark Walsingham talk, fantastic. But
still got the same kind of atmosphere.
Still got the same kind of atmosphere. And I miss those kind of.
How many people turn up for those?
Well, but I think there's about 200, 250, but it's only for BCSG members.
Right.
Evening of Carp, where you have 2 people, 3 people on a certain theme. I love going to conferences. But the problem is I'm just there, stood on a stand, signing autographs, tying rigs. I never get to see my friends at conferences. And that's the whole problem with conferences. I am simply one of the, exhibits, really, for want of a better word.
I guess that's the difference with the BCSG as well, isn't it? You've got that kind of group of people there that want to be there for that purpose.
And I'm a small player. When I walk down the BCSG, I am the 13-year-old Julian Cundiff.
Right.
There's Peter Springate. There's Robin Mundy. There's Chris Ball. There's Derek Stritt. I have never, ever overinflated my ego. I still see him as Peter Springate, and I still have a picture with Mr. Springate. I still see Chris Ball. I've never, ever gone, what have you done, Pete? I always know my place in the pecking order of the establishment, and that is, I think, what's kept me grounded.
Yeah.
I never strode into that conference thinking, Jules is here, because Tim would go, put the coffee on, mate. I know my place.
Would it be nice for the BCSG to open their doors a little bit more, or is that part of the appeal?
I think the part of the appeal is they want to keep it to a certain amount of, you've got to have, I think, is it 15 years of carp fishing experience, etc., etc. Yeah, I think it would be nice for the BCSG, but I don't think there's a demand. It's a different world. I know the history of carp fishing. Dick Walker, Bill Quinlan, people like that. Although I had no desire to be them or fish the waters they fished, I knew the history of my carp fishing. The Hutchinsons, Malins, Maddocks, Littles, I knew even more about those. But I knew, nowadays, when I talk to people about the history of carp fishing, they've no interest. You've got to step outside Korda HQ. You've got to step outside Nash HQ. Your average guy who goes carp fishing does not have the interest in the carp fishing history that you and I had.
Why is that interest stagnated, do you think?
It's a different world.
It's just everything's information's readily available, and they're not so.
Timeline is everything. You go to a concert nowadays, your heritage bands, your Kisses, your Rolling Stones,
before,
they have to play the greatest hits because the people they are attracting are not hardcore fans. And you have to understand, in carp fishing, whereas there was at one time 50,000 hardcore carpers who knew everything. Nowadays, you might have 500,000 carpers. If there was 50,000 carpers, you wouldn't be here. There would be no Korda podcast. There would be no Urban Banks. There would be none of that. Carp fishing is so big, but there still isn't there's still not 500,000 hardcore carpers. It's a smaller amount of hardcore carpers.
Yeah, you got the 90%ers and maybe the 10%ers.
And there's nothing, and they're no less valuable or invaluable. That, the huge growth in carp fishing has meant we have these kind of things. And to me, they're no less impressive, but I'm more interested in what Peter Springate has to say than somebody else, because of my
generation.
But, I see them and it's a really funny state of affairs is we used to organise, obviously the Five Lakes Carp Conference, and one of the jobs I had to do would be to walk people across to the main stand. I'd do my talk, then I'd walk Terry across, or Lee or Josh or whatever. And in the early days, in the 2000 to 2007, 2008, when Terry was, he was the new kid on the block, you couldn't get him across the stand without 1,000,001 people wanted to have their picture taken with him. And I noticed in later years, I couldn't, I'd walk Terry across and people of a certain era would know who he was and have their picture taken with him. And yet I couldn't get Ali across or Alan Blair across because they were the new timeline of the bulk of people who went to those things. So you take Chris Ball to a BCS conference, everybody knows him. You take him to the big one at Farnborough, he's less well known, not because, no disrespect to him, but because it's a different. Korda and Nash are selling to the big community. It's not that there's less interest, it's a different world. It's a bigger world.
Yeah, talking about Carp Society conferences, did you ever want to go up on stage and play guitar or anything in those?
I can play, but I was never good enough. I know my limits. I ain't gonna go and cast against Terry Edmonds. I'm not gonna go and fish against Dave Lane. I'm not gonna go and sharpen hook against Adam Penning. I'm not gonna try and compete in the carp fishing sexist angle anymore. Sometimes you need to know your level, and I can play, but I can't play as well as those guys.
Right. Did you ever look at them and think, God, I'd love to be up there, Or you lead guitarist or singer?
I'm more of a rhythm guitarist. I can play rhythm. But I've always realised my what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. When I was motorbike racing, I could see the guys who were faster than me. When I was fishing, I knew the guys that were going to be fishing for big fish. And I've always known what I'm good at and how to improve. I can make Julian Cundiff better. I can't make him somebody else. And, I watch the guys on stage. I've no desire. I wouldn't mind coming back as Bon Jovi or Paul Stanley from Kiss. But it's two-way thing. You don't know what they walk in, the feet they walk in. And when people say to me, God, I'd love to be sponsored by Nash. And I go, you don't know what it's like to come home at 6 o'clock at night after a full day at work, to answer 22 letters, to then write an article for somebody to say, right, we need you down at Bolton Aquatics on a wet Saturday in February to talk.
Isn't it?
And that, you don't know what it's like to be in those people's. It always looks glamorous to be Slash or Danny Fairbrass or Alan Blair or Julian Cundiff. But believe you me, there is a downside. And I never, ever think somebody else has got it better than me. I've never thought somebody else has got it better than me.
Yeah, right.
I've never thought that way.
Yeah, interesting. Talking about Carp Society as well, what did you make of the whole horseshoe scandal?
I was very saddened.
Do you think the reputation of the Carp Society can recover from that?
It's a different era again. It's what is the interest in the Carp Society? I think the Carp Society suffered, and for people like Tim and Derek Stritton and others who put everything on the line for the Carp Society, I've nothing but the utmost of respect for them. I wouldn't do it. What they did to protect the Carp Society was incredible. And what annoyed me was all the years, from 89 to maybe 98, I did so many slideshows and never charged a penny. The money I made went to the Carp Society. Never ever got paid a fee. And I didn't expect to get a fee because Tim Paisley never got. Tim led by design. Right, Jules, we're going down to do this talk. There was never talk of money. What Tim has given back, I thought, well, I can't ask for a fee, and I didn't really want a fee. And to see that those people who were never involved in the early days of the Carp Society, they were not there in.
Do you think they went in there with an agenda in the first place?
I don't think they went. I'm not sure. I very much doubt it that they went in with the agenda in the first place. But I think they saw an opportunity.
Right.
I don't know the full facts of the case, and I'm always loath to discuss stuff I don't know. But I was very saddened. But having worked in the court, I'm not surprised. Money, people will do things for money that they normally wouldn't do, and I was less saddened about what they did than proud of what people like Tim and Derek Stritton did to stand up and fight for the Carp Society and the Carp Society Museum in Horseshoe Lake. I have nothing but admiration. What those other people did, I find that thinking about negativity is no good. I'd rather think about what was positive out of that than what was negative out of that.
Okay, what was positive?
Positive that people like Tim were prepared to put his, 20, 30,000 pounds on the line, that it would have been very easy for Tim to say, well, the Carp Society is not really part of my life anymore. It's easier for me not to get involved. It's a long way down for Tim Paisley from Sheffield to Horseshoe Lake for these meetings. And I'm embarrassed sometimes about my lack of giving to the Carp Society, but I can only do so much for so many people. But the positive thing is there are still people who are prepared to put principles before cash.
Yeah, and another positive is those people have slithered away into the distance. Yeah, because find a rock somewhere.
Because when you're dead and gone, your reputation is all you leave behind, and those people left a reputation of. Well, if I could spit, I would. That's the reputation there. Whereas people like Tim and Derek and all those people who fought for the Carp Society, their reputation, the Tim Paisley Lodge, that's what it should be called. And I look at Tim and think, Tim reminds me of my mum. When people say, wow, haven't you achieved a lot, Julian, and you must be proud of what you achieved. And I am. But then I look at Tim and my mum and think, I ain't done nothing really. What Tim
you've done enough.
Yeah, I've done. Yeah, my mum, her pastoral work, 13 books. She was a vicar. She buried people, she married people, and I have achieved things. But when I look at what people like Tim and my mum have done, and Danny and Kevin Nash, I put it into perspective, and that keeps you grounded.
Yeah, and we're all different as well, aren't we? We've all achieved different things.
Yeah.
And some of it's public and some of it's not, and some of us become rich, some of us might not ever become rich.
Yeah,
but
Danny Fairbrass never won the Sexiest Angler. Neither did Tim Paisley.
Exactly.
Yeah, Danny, what have you ever done?
We need to talk to him about that, don't we? How does that feel then, Dan?
He was too young.
Yeah.
He'd be too young
It's
then.
too young.
He was too young. He was age barred.
Right, okay. So getting back to music and stuff. So if you needed a guitar lesson, you would have some people that you could possibly ask.
Yeah, I think the thing with guitars, it's practice.
Yeah,
it's practice. The more you practice, the easier it gets. It's like you watch a guitarist who's maybe been tired and emotional and taken a few substances other than vitamin C's. You'll see he starts watching his hands when he's playing his guitar. The best guitarists don't look at the hands. And some of the greatest guitarists, all of a sudden you can see them looking at the hands. A bit like boxers. When they stop putting the roadworks in, the first thing you notice on a heavyweight boxer, his legs are gone. He ends up with thin legs. His legs have gone. And the thing with the guitarist, the great guitarist, it's natural. It's practice. And to be a better guitar player, I would have to spend time practicing, and I don't have the desire to. I can look at Slash and Paul Stanley and Adrian Smith and think, do you know what? I need to know my place. I'm quite happy to watch Adrian do that because that's what he's good at.
Yeah,
I could get a guitar lesson, I'm sure, but to be honest, it's better to learn about hook sharp.
You need to ask one of those guys, don't you?
Well, that would be my dream to.
Where's Adrian at the moment?
Adrian, the Rio. He's just done the. He's just done Rio. They've
the Rockin'.
The Rockin' Rio.
That's a big gig, isn't it?
He's such a down to earth guy. I've met him a couple of times, and again, he's somebody I'm not starstruck by, but he is Adrian Smith from Iron Maiden, and I remember meeting him, and it was probably half an hour before the show, and it was getting near the show, and then it was 20 minutes to go, and I said, do you need to go now and warm up with the guys? He's like, no, we just get on stage.
And just
I'm
play.
thinking
They've done it. They've done it
so many
years.
times. It's just I just put the jacket on, the sweatband, and we go out and play. I'm thinking, yeah, of course, you don't need to be in the, in the rehearsal.
Do you know the coolest thing with it? I met him last year, and my friend knew him already, and met him in Harefield.
Yeah,
that's where he lives around there. And he was such a nice guy. I was chatting to him not as a rock star, as someone that was just interested in fishing, and then we were fishing the following night, and my guy on the lake, Stu, texted me and said, guess where our mate is tonight? And he was playing a gig actually that night after he was going in there picking his sail up or whatever, and he had a gig in the O2 that night. But very, very down to earth guy, and we have spoken about him before on the podcast because it's great to see fishing, and then those two things seem so far apart, but how someone that lives that lifestyle can equally as enjoy Doing what?
He's put it to perspective. I think
Absolutely.
Adrian puts his into perspective. He's not an LA rock star, is he? As Bruce, what was it? Bruce Dickinson. I don't want to be a tattoo millionaire. I think Adrian puts it into perspective. He understands he's fortunate, but that's. I mean, Adrian's been through the mill. You know, he was out of Iron Maiden. He had his own struggles, and you know what? He came back. And he is the most professional. You will not meet somebody, and that's why I was looked up at. You know, people. I don't want to be that person where somebody says I met him and he wasn't the person I expected to be. Every rock star I've met, without exception, has been a nice guy. I've gone away thinking,
we got some pictures, Tobes.
Wow, yeah.
Have a look.
They've all been the guys.
Kiss and Slash and Def Leppard.
They've all been the guys I expect them to be. You know, they're not my friends, they're not my mates, but when I've met them, I thought, wow, you are the guy I wanted you to be. You were the guy from Kiss Alive 2 in 1977. You were the guy from Hysteria in 83, 84. You were the guy from Appetite for Destruction in 1988. And I've gone away and I'm the happiest guy ever. And I know how that makes me feel. So when a kid comes to me at a show or comes to me on the bank or writes to me, I want him to have that same feeling from me. Obviously, you put it to perspective that I got from Slash. Slash was as cool as anything. Hey, man, do you have a picture? You know, and you know, Paul Stanley is like, yeah, no problem. And, you know, that's how I want it to be. They're in a Super League, but I want the same feeling. Because I know how you can crush people. You know, so many people come up to me and say, how are you doing, Jules? And I don't know who they are, but they'll say, you gave me the big fish mix recipe in 1994. Was it 4 mil or 3 mil of cranberry? Now, I know because I'm OCD. But if I went to him, sorry, mate, I don't remember you. That's the worst thing in the world, isn't it? That guy is going to be crushed. Yeah. So I've always made the effort to talk to him.
Yeah. Let me put this picture up. That's a good one.
Well done, mate. Well, that's Kiss, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Kiss.
You got the same T-shirt. This T-shirt you've got on, actually, Jules. Is this the guy you know? Is this anything?
Ross Halfin is the rock photographer.
Yeah, right.
He is the rock photographer, and his son now is following the ethos. He's now Oliver, his son. But Ross Halfin was from a different non-PC era.
Def Leppard.
Yeah, non-PC era.
What about this one as well?
Yeah, that's Def Leppard. That's that was the Hysteria tour. So that was December of last year. And again, you know, the funny thing is that Joe Elliott, I went out with a girl called Julie, and Julie's mum was the dinner lady of Joe Elliott at his school. And Joe Elliott will, you know, for the ups and the... So what impresses me is longevity. They have had their ups and downs, like I've had my ups and downs. It's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up. You've got Rick, who's had Bell's palsy. You've got Vivian, who's got cancer. You've got me, who could have been Michael Hutchins.
Exactly.
You've got Joe, and he's had a couple of marriages. You've got Phil, who has been in Girl, and he got booed off stage, and he joined to take...
Was he into bodybuilding as well?
He's into M&A, and he is...
Right.
He takes his shirt off, and then I realise why I need to keep my shirt on.
Yeah.
And then you've got Rick, who
Well,
lost his arm.
didn't he?
He's lost his arm. You know, so everybody wants to be Def Leppard, but nobody wants to be what comes with Def Leppard.
You don't want to go through the shit that they've gone through
Exactly.
as well, do
So everybody wants to be a famous carp angler or be sponsored, but nobody wants to drive to watch 1001 slideshows. Nobody wants to sit there and go to work the next morning. And that's what carp fishing's taught me about. You know, those guys, I don't think for one second they've got it better than me. You know, there's two of them are probably richer than me, probably just two. I'm only joking.
That's it. So you'll be getting some letters about how to become rich now, won't you?
I don't want to become rich. Do you know what? I don't want to become rich. I'm happy at my level.
I could do with a little bit more, but not.
No.
There's a lot more to be said for that than meets the eye, I think.
Oh yeah, those guys will not know what money's about, you know.
No.
But they're happy, and everybody who meet them says they're great guys.
Yeah.
And I want to be that great guy, you know. And you know, you catch a lot of carp, but those albums go in a tip, and all you are is memories. And what I'd rather be good memories to people rather than, well, we caught a lot of carp, but. Which reminds me of the last funny story. I remember Albert Romp. Remember Albert Romp? Yeah. And I remember in the early 90s when I was sort of just starting to puff my chest out a bit, and there was this thing about how do you want to be remembered, blah, blah, blah. And I said quite innocently, no, I don't want to be remembered for catching big carp. And Albert went, you certainly won't be remembered for that, son. And I thought,
He was a bit of a joke. He still is. I think he's had a bit of a fishing revival actually recently. I've heard he's been catching a few. Yeah. I think he's had his ups and downs, hasn't he? But
Albert, he's such a funny man. And when I was a young kid, you get spots, don't you? And it always comes out at the worst time. And whenever the Carp Society conference would come on, and I must find this picture if you can send it you, I'd always get a spot on the end of my nose. And I used to say, oh, no. And you turn to the Carp Society conference, you'd have this big spot. And nobody else would mention it. Everybody, how you do? And Albert would go, is that a spot on the end of your nose? And it's like, he was such a joker. But again, he was a guy who I learnt things from. And the trick to being a successful carp angler is not to model yourself on any one person. Don't do everything Alan Blair does, or Danny does, or Damien does. I look at all the little things that people do. Albert Romp talked about at night, about how the weed dropped and cover the end tackles, and about casting out at a certain time.
So interesting, yep.
And I thought, I can pinch that off him. So when you look at what I talk about, don't copy me exactly.
He came up with those stringer rigged piggy. What did he call those?
Those multi-bait stringers.
That's right. Make them look like stringers.
Exactly. And so you can learn a little bit of everything. When I go fishing, everything I use is what I've pinched off somebody else. So I used to think the scope rods were a joke. 10-foot rods, that's all right. And when I started using them, I realised because of my casting ability, which was more of a flick, that a 10-foot rod was simply an extension of my arm. I got that off Alan Blair, and I realised about lead clips, and I realised about sharpened hooks, and I realised about high vis. All these, I didn't dream them up overnight, and I don't kid myself. But what I did is I watched what other people did, and always did it at least as good as them, if not better. So I realised how I could make the multi-rig more efficient than I think Mike Kavanagh fishes it. Mike Kavanagh gave up with the multi-rig, but the way I do it, I think for me is more efficient. I don't use the rig twice. I only use a hook once. And Mike will say, well, blah, 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 blah. But to me, the way I fish the multi-rig is more efficient for me than the way Mike Kavanagh does it. But he uses it as a multi-rig and I use it as a pop-up presentation. Never use it twice. Never have done.
Yeah, you can use it. I mean, we spoke earlier about adapting those rigs. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with adapting a rig either for yourself either. I mean, we found... adaptations around that. I was going to have to talk to you as well about your working in the courts because I would imagine you've got a few stories about that. I mean, you didn't look like the. So, what was your job title again? It was.
I was a legal advisor, so in effect, I represent, which we are now called. You called lawyers for the court,
right?
So I was the bloke in front of court to advise the magistrates on the law, made sure people didn't do anything, advise the magistrates on practice and procedure, legal technicalities, sentencing guidelines, etc., etc.
But you would have looked a little bit different to the average guy there, wouldn't you?
How I got the job was amazing. I had no idea about what I wanted to do as a job. And I went for a careers evening. And literally, there were 3 of us who'd failed our O-levels and had to go back and sit the next year, which is really embarrassing because you're in the year below and you might as well have that great big dunce hat on. And we went to the careers evening. And I remember my dad saying to me, in the 80s, there's going to be a recession and you don't want to be doing O-levels, A-levels, university, year out job, otherwise you'll be the highest qualified shelf stacker in Selby. He says, get yourself a job and qualify within work. And I went to the careers evening and there was a girl advertising the magistrates court, working as a temp in the magistrates court, admin. And I sort of said to her, what's this job all about? She says, well, it's not really for boys, it's just an office of 6 girls.
That sounds all right.
That sounds all right. And you get paid. I'm thinking, money. And so I went for the job, and there was 3 of us went for the job. And I went, and I had my dad's sports jacket on, a pair of flares, a Kiss belt buckle, and the tie, a huge tie. Now, out of 3, I got the job. I mean, I got a 1 in 3, and I got the job. And literally over the years, I got better, and I qualified. And, I was the advisor in the court. But literally, I have seen everything that you could possibly want. And one of the funniest
So we've got some newspaper clippings.
I have got a couple of them.
You can throw up if you find them.
The lady who took her clothes off in court. There was a woman. Now, in those days, she would have been seen as mad, strange. These days, she would have mental health issues. And one of her issues was that if she felt that the state authority was punishing her, she would take her clothes off. So usually when the police would arrest her, she'd strip off.
Extreme.
Yeah, a bit extreme. Where were those girls when I was 15?
Exactly.
Where were those girls?
Yeah.
And so we had her at court, and she'd been done for either assaulting a police officer, being rude in court. I'm sat in court, and we called her into court. The prosecutor, lovely man, David, man of God, he had the church cross on, and he put the facts, and he, to be fair, he softened the facts very nicely. And I said, Miss Gregg, would you stand up? And I says, you understand what you're charged with? Yeah, yes. And I said, are you guilty or not guilty? She says, well, guilty. I said, so eventually she accepted she was guilty. She said the police were bullying her. The magistrate's retired. And they came back in, and the chairman, George, I won't say his second name, said, right, Miss Gregg, stand up. In relation to this, we are going to fine you £25. And I remember looking at me saying, are they fining me? I says, they're fining me. She says, is that a punishment? I'm thinking, yeah, it's a punishment. And all of a sudden, the jumper came off, and she was down to a T-shirt, then the T-shirt, and then the bra. And I looked, and she was a well-built. She was a 36 egger rather than a 6 egger.
You're being very conservative.
I'm being very conservative. Yeah. And the bra came off, and everything went south. And she just threw the bra over my head, and it landed on the chairman's desk. And the woman went under the she then dipped under the desk and hid under the desk with just a bottom bits on and no top. And I thought, they're paying me for this. I'm getting paid for this. And I whatever it is, I've seen it in court. I've seen the flashers. I've seen people who've put certain appendixes in bread rolls and asked them to put tomato sauce on it. And it was the greatest job ever. And it taught me that nothing is, you should never think anything's unusual.
Yeah.
But I think I've got it here. Is that the right one?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
You get a mention as well in the paper, don't you?
Yeah, Mr. Cundiff said the woman was upset and disturbed.
So what made you take centre stage there, or how...
Publicity, mate.
Yeah.
And any news is good.
That demonstration lasted. Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah, in those days you could speak on behalf of the court, but when you became a civil servant, that was God. There was you had to go through the centre. I thought, I'd be sacked for that now. But in those days, David Lampitt. I remember a woman, and as she started to take her top off, he's going, No, please. And over the top of him, this bra, and I'm thinking, wow. And of course, it was the era of Lady Di, and of course, she was called Diane Gregg, so it's Lady Di.
Yeah.
Strips for court.
Yeah, right.
So, it was the greatest job. It was a leveller. I always preferred not to have a full-time employment in fishing, because no matter how bad fishing was, I could always step outside of it, and I've got my music, I've got my court job. It taught me boundaries, so I can departmentalise things.
Yeah.
No matter how bad carp fishing is, no matter how few fish I catch, I can always say, yeah, but I can go home and watch Formula One. I've got the girl, I've got my fiance.
It's always nice to have that, isn't it? I think, right, okay, this is crap today, but there's this or this.
There is a life outside of it.
Yeah. I can't imagine people that only have one thing. That would be.
There are, for every Terry Hearn, every Tim Paisley, every, Alan Blair and Danny. Those are three people I know who literally are consumed. Tim likes his golf and things like that, but you would say their life is consumed by carp fishing, and it's not being dulled. For every one of those, there are thousands of people who are involved in industry that don't have the interest anymore. And anybody who's met me will say, I'm still as keen in 2019 as I was in 1986. And as Albert Romp would say, that's because you've still not mastered it, you useless. I'm still as keen now as I was in 2019, and I'll still be as keen next year. When that buzzer goes, I'm still excited. Once that buzzer goes and you see the fish on the surface and it goes in the net, I don't need to weigh fish. That's job done.
It's interesting you say about mastering something as well, isn't it? Because with fishing, you can fish, some of the top, catch some of the biggest fish in the country, and it can feel like the end of the rainbow. Yeah. Whereas a lot of other stuff in life, you've never
ever got there.
As a musician, you've never necessarily made your best album, or you could always shoot a better score in golf or whatever,
or win another world championship.
Yeah.
But carp fishing, it does.
You can get to that point.
A lot of people who've caught big fish have said, even when they still fish, I had a year out, or I was empty. I mean, Lee said it about catching.
Lee said it on our podcast. He talks really well about that.
Yeah, and I think Dave Lane has talked about it. I think quite a few people have talked about it, that it felt empty thereafter. But for me, even though I caught Decade from Church Pool at 49.6, I genuinely am still excited by a 17-pounder in November. It seemed to excite more people about what I caught, then don't get me wrong, I was blown away by it, but in no way did it dull the 17-pounder. No way did it dull coming down to Essex and catching other fish. It didn't make me want to catch bigger fish. It just made me understand that if I never catch a bigger one again, I'm not bothered.
That's the secret to what you do, isn't it? You're just as happy catching smaller ones as you are bigger ones, and people can, question that, can't they? But at the end of the day, if you've always got that drive to carry on because of that,
Absolutely.
It's great, isn't it? And the people that probably say that, maybe if they could appreciate that side of it more,
enjoy it more,
they would enjoy it more, and they probably would be more likely to stick with it.
You just got to keep that. You've got to keep that lighted stage. It's like I have, I've talked to Kiss. I've carried the Gene Simmons bag. I've stood at the side of the stage. I've been in the pit. Nothing will ever compete, that curtain dropping in the pitch black and seeing these guys in full kabuki who are old enough to be my granddad, who, etc., who are not 22 anymore. But to me, it's still the same feeling I get when I see Tim or when I see Terry or when I catch that 70-pounder. I'm still as enthused by seeing them as I ever was. I'm excited about life. Life excites me. I get excited about driving. I get excited about listening to a podcast. I haven't been dulled about life. And I think too many people have had the excitement of life knocked out of them, not by other people's choices, but by their own. And it's very easy to say, it was your fault, I'm not excited about X, Y, and Z. And it isn't that. You've got to know. Chris Ball, great, but he said, know when not to kick the arse out of it. And sometimes I need to leave that water alone for a year because I found my way on that. I need to not get bored catching carp or not get bored not catching carp. You know when not to kick the arse out of it. And once you know when not to kick the arse out of it, you will always continue to appreciate it.
Yeah, you said that really well. Julian, this has been a great podcast. I've really enjoyed this.
Oh, thanks, man.
I'd love to get out fishing with you or do something one day because you could just spend so much time in your company and listen to you talk.
Yeah, I'm always happy to help people. And the thing with fishing is, if I'm helping somebody, I don't fish usually when I'm teaching somebody to fish. I love company, but when I'm fishing, and when my tuitions are all about you fishing and me helping you and watching what you're doing wrong. I can't fish half-arsed. I can't go in the second best swim. I can't not bait up properly. So yeah, I'm always, I say to people, contact me on Facebook. This isn't about me making any money out of it. Contact me on Twitter. See me at the shows. Come and say hello. I only want you to help catch, because you are the next me. That you are going to be sat here one day, passing the words on like I am.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's been great and it's been really entertaining.
Oh, cheers, mate.
And I hope everyone enjoys this as much as we've enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Thanks to Danny from Korda for asking me to be here. And thanks to Alan and Kevin for saying, yeah, that's great, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. It shows a little bit of respect between companies.
Absolutely.
Which is
We're all,
important.
it's, Korda made carp fishing sexy for the masses. So, thank you, Korda, for asking me on. And thank you for Nash for saying, yeah, get on and just show them.
We're all happy.
All right, mate.
Julian Cundiff, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Simon.
Thanks.
The Thinking Tackle Podcast.